Okay, here's the first one. Myth or true? Carrots can help you see in the dark. Myth. While carrots are full of vitamin A, which helps maintain eyesight, you won't get night vision. In the 1940s, British Air Forces invented a new radar, and to keep it secret, they told everyone it was carrots that helped them see at nighttime. Diamonds aren't a special gemstone. True. While diamonds may be a great engagement rock, they're not as rare as we've been made to believe. Advertising campaigns have made this very common rock something extraordinary. If you want something really rare, painite gems will look beautiful and empty your wallet at the same time. Around $50,000 a carat. Fruit Loops have different flavors. Myth. There's no point in avoiding the color you don't like. All the colors are the same flavor. Even Kellogg's has stated that they all share the same blended fruit flavor. Well, now I don't know what to believe anymore. Dropping a penny from the Empire State Building can obliterate a person below. Myth. While the penny won't tickle, it will not damage anyone on the ground. Simply, the penny can't build up enough speed while it's tumbling to the ground. Better to just keep the change in your pocket. The moon has a dark side. Myth. No, the moon isn't going to use the Force to rule. Our satellite is tidally locked with the Earth, meaning that we're always looking at one side. But there's no permanent dark side. Kleenex was originally designed for gas masks. True. Yeah, Kimberly-Clark originally designed a thin cotton substitute to be used as a filter. In 1924, Kleenex began selling in the U.S. as a cold cream and makeup remover, eventually turning into the soft tissues we love today. Chocolate is bad for you. Boy, isn't that a myth. While too much chocolate, just like too much of anything, can indeed do some harm, a little bit can be quite good for you. Not just any chocolate, though, only the dark variety. Yum. Weekend sleep-ins will help you catch up on lost sleep. That's a myth. As comfy as your bed is on a Sunday morning, you just can't make up for lost sleep. Irregular sleep can lower your concentration and performance. If you're refreshed when you wake up, you've had the right amount. Zombies are real. True. Now, no human has ever turned into a hungry zombie that we're shown so much in the movies, but they do exist in the animal kingdom. A fungus that has a really long name I don't want to pronounce takes over ants with its chemicals. Under the control of the fungus, the ant leaves its family to find a very specific branch or leaf. Then, it lets the fungus sprout out of it and release spores back into the world. How delightful. The largest living organism is the blue whale, African elephant, or shag. Myth. While all of those are large, the honey fungus in the Blue Mountains, Oregon wins by quite a bit. With the length of 3.4 miles, that's 6.5 Burj Khalifas end to end, and it's still growing. But on the bright side, it's edible. Mushroom omelet, anyone? Turkeys can blush. True. Just like humans, turkeys blush when excited, angry, or sick. The skin on their heads and necks can turn red or even a shade of blue. The fleshy flap of skin that hangs over their neck is called a snood. It also turns bright red when the bird is excited. Yeah, maybe not at Thanksgiving, though. We only have 5 senses. Myth. There's no right number. Some say 5, 7, 14, 24, or even 57. Our most basic senses are actually sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. But also movement, body position, temperature, balance, and the sense of our internal state, like feeling your heart. For example, close your eyes and touch your nose. That's proprioception, or body position. Bats are blind. Myth. Bats' eyesight is actually better at nighttime than ours. They just can't see as well in daytime because they only see in black and white. Perhaps this myth arose from the fact that bats use sonar to navigate without sight. Unicorns are real. True. They're not horses, though. It's deer that are likely the culprit. A single horn can be a genetic anomaly found in some species, possibly leading to the unicorn legend that formed a long time ago. Honey never spoils. Myth. Uncovered in a humid environment, it will spoil. As long as the lid stays on it and no water is added to it, honey shouldn't go bad though. Having antifungal and antibacterial properties means no organisms can live in it. No matter how old your stored honey is, it's probably perfectly edible. Oranges are always orange. Myth. Sweet oranges are a hybrid of tangerines and the pomelo, with a bright green skin to help protect them from the sun. In warmer climates like Southeast Asia, oranges are still a bright green when ripe. Makes you wonder what came first, the fruit or the color. There are bugs in your strawberry frappuccino. True. But not anymore. A dye made of ground-up tiny insects called cochineal bugs is used by many companies to make the color red. Starbucks stopped using bug red color in their strawberry frappuccinos in 2015. Firefighters use wetter water. True. To be more efficient at stopping fires, firefighters recently started adding certain chemicals to the water. The wetting agents reduce the surface tension of the water, making it easier to spread and soak into objects. Leave wasps alone and they'll leave you alone. Myth. While this works for bees, their cousins, the yellow jackets, will disagree. Known as one of the most bad-tempered wasps, they've been said to sting unprovoked, even if you just happen to walk by their nest. If you see wasps, give them a wide berth. The Eiffel Tower was supposed to be torn down after 20 years. True. The Eiffel Tower was designed to show off France's industrial power during the World's Fair. The designers cleverly put transmitters and antennas on top to make the tower too useful to eventually demolish. Head lice prefer dirty hair. Myth. Lice don't really think about hair cleanliness. They simply need human hair to hang on to, whether it's squeaky clean or greasier than a fryer. Lice feed off of our scalps, and the hair is just a place to hang out. Camels' humps store water. Myth. Camels don't store water. They store fat in their tissues, just like me after the holidays. These reservoirs of fat allow camels to survive for days in the desert without stopping for food. They drink large amounts of water at a time and store that in their bloodstream. You need to drink 8 glasses of water a day. Myth. Staying hydrated is critical, especially in hotter weather. But we seem to forget that every drink is mainly water, even tea and coffee. Our bodies are the best indicators for when to drink water. Feel thirsty? Then it's time to have a drink. An elephant never forgets. True. Having the biggest brain of all land animals, elephants should have a great memory, and they do. Being able to remember their entire territory, friends, and spots to find water is crucial to the social structure of elephants. They might even have a better memory than you and I. Now, where did I leave my keys? Bananas grow upside down. True. Bananas grow naturally towards the sun as they're getting larger. That's why there's a curve. So does that mean we've been peeling them the wrong way this whole time? Maybe. No number before 1,000 contains the letter A. True. Now you can try and spell each number out if you like, but I bet you're just going to take my word for it. The Guinness Book of World Records was created to settle arguments. True. The world's best trivia book was published in 1955 after an argument about the fastest game bird in Europe. The managing director of Guinness Brewery realized there wasn't a go-to book for trivial questions, so he created his own, and the rest is history. You're eating real wasabi. Myth. When you're sitting down for tasty sushi, that green paste sometimes isn't wasabi, it's horseradish. Real wasabi is very expensive with a milder taste to it. If it's not made in front of you, it's not going to be the real thing. So there. Some so-called survival experts claim that in a critical situation, when you're out of water, it's okay to go number 1 and then drink this, nature's lemonade. Well, listen closely. That's nothing but an extremely dangerous myth.
Not only is it gross, but it won't quench your thirst either. Even more, you're going to experience the opposite effect and get dehydrated at a much faster rate. You see, this bladder brew is the last step in your body's attempt to get rid of waste. No wonder it's brimming with waste products, which you should, by no means, reintroduce into your poor dehydrated body. However, it works just like water when you want to cool your body temperature a bit. Feel free to use your yellow rivers to dampen your clothing in case you want to freshen up. Another popular myth about hydrating your body speaks about sucking on a stone if you end up dehydrated. Well, while it's sort of true that sucking on a stone can help stimulate saliva flow, it's actually an ancient survival technique that people once used worldwide. But it doesn't provide actual hydration since, obviously, you can't get any water from the stone itself. Moreover, there is a risk of accidentally inhaling the stone if it's small, and it can potentially lead to choking. And finally, you never know what this stone experienced in life before you somehow decided to suck on it. Now, you might have heard that moss grows on the north side of trees, and you can use this knowledge to navigate through a forest. Well, I must disappoint you. Contrary to popular belief, and to what is often depicted in cartoons and movies, moss doesn't consistently grow on the north side of trees. The growth of moss depends on the species and the local climate. It thrives in areas where conditions are the most favorable, and it has nothing to do with the north or south, so don't rely on this rule too much. So, space blankets actually do work. Despite their thin, trash bag-like appearance, mylar-coated emergency blankets can indeed keep you warm. The key lies in their aluminum coating, which is thermal reflective. This allows the blanket to reflect infrared energy and retain heat. If you're experiencing shock or exposure, your body loses heat to the air, and it leads to a drop in body temperature. A space blanket helps prevent this by keeping moisture in your clothes and reducing evaporation, which in turn limits heat loss. Wrap yourself in one of those tinfoil-like sheets and you'll stay much warmer. Another plus, these blankets are compact and affordable, so don't forget to throw them in your backpack before heading out. Now, loads of people think that when they're lost outdoors, they need to find food first. That's a dangerous belief. In this kind of emergency situation, prioritize water and shelter over food. A study from 2009 indicates that humans can survive up to 2 months without food and between 8 to 21 days without both food and water, even though this number varies based on individual and environmental factors. In survival situations, finding water and shelter is far more critical than getting food. In harsh conditions, you might only last 3 hours without adequate shelter and 3 days without water. If you have water and shelter, it significantly increases your chance of survival. Unfortunately, there are also many misconceptions about treating hypothermia, like the statement that a hot tub can cure this condition. Now, it's true that rewarming is essential when dealing with hypothermia, where the body's core temperature drops below the normal 98.6 degrees. But placing a hypothermic person into a hot tub can cause extreme pain and may even trigger a serious health condition, like a heart attack. Instead, put hot water bottles under the person's armpits or use skin-to-skin rewarming. Avoid using high heat sources. They can be extremely harmful in this situation. Another myth connected to hypothermia is that you should let a hypothermic person sleep. In reality, it's crucial to keep them awake while warming them up. Symptoms like shivering, confusion, slurred speech, and clumsiness indicate severe hypothermia, and drowsiness can follow. Allowing a hypothermic person to sleep can be dangerous, potentially leading to the worst possible outcome. Stay alert and make sure that the person remains conscious while you're warming them up. How about feeding a hypothermic person? You may have heard that you should by no means do it, but this is actually false in mild to moderate cases of hypothermia. The treatment for hypothermia differs from that of normal shock. Feeding someone in shock is dangerous because small, repeated doses of high-calorie foods are beneficial. Such foods generate metabolic heat, helping the hypothermic person regain their ability to produce body heat. Now, when lost in the wilderness, you can eat anything animals eat. Well, hold on. It might be one of the most dangerous survival myths. Although humans share some biological similarities with other animals, there are significant differences in our dietary tolerance. Some plants that are safe for animals can be extremely dangerous for humans. Birds, for example, consume a variety of berries, some of which are toxic to us. Even squirrels, which typically eat nuts, safe for humans, sometimes gnaw on mushrooms and nuts that can make us feel very unwell. Just because an animal eats something doesn't mean it's safe for you to munch on. There is a belief that to find water you should follow flying birds, but this method is super unreliable. While some aquatic birds rarely stray far from water, many species roam extensively in search of food. There are people who believe that geese fly toward water at dusk, but these birds might just be heading to a clearing to rest for the night. A common belief is that if you can dent wood with your thumbnail, it's suitable for starting a friction fire. This myth is quite widespread, but it isn't reliable. Some softer woods that pass the thumbnail test are ineffective, while some denser woods are quite good for friction fires. The success of the thumbnail test is coincidental. It's not a dependable method altogether. So stop destroying your poor nails. Another misconception connected with friction fires is that you should use hardwood to get the best flames. While oak and other hardwoods are excellent for general firewood, they are not ideal for friction fires. Hardwood's high ignition temperature and density make it unsuitable for friction fire drills or boards. Instead, you can use non-resinous softwoods like cottonwood, basswood, cedar, and willow, which are much better suited for starting friction fires. Meanwhile, in an emergency situation, eating raw meat and seafood can help you survive. Well, that's not entirely true. Indeed, survival shows often depict hosts eating all kinds of raw things, but this isn't the best survival practice. Raw animal meat contains pathogens, including bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms. They can easily cause serious and hard-to-diagnose illnesses in humans. Many people consume sushi and don't experience any health issues. But that's because certain raw seafood from saltwater is safe because the pathogens it contains are not harmful to humans. To minimize health risks, always make sure that meat and seafood are properly cooked before you eat them. Rubbing two sticks together isn't likely to produce a fire. Of course, friction is a real way to create a flame, but friction fires techniques require patience, practice, and even a bit of luck. It might look easy in movies or TV shows, but don't get overconfident, thinking you'll be able to do it without tons of practice in a stressful situation. If you're still eager to try it out, use a downward speed motion rather than a lot of force. Okay, so let's say you don't have enough patience to start a friction fire, but you do have matches. Well, they got wet at one point, but they're all dry now. Great! Not really. It's a myth that when dried, matches will work as they're supposed to. You see, the chemicals used in matches are vulnerable to humidity and moisture. Regular safety matches have a package with a striking surface that's made of a gritty material, for instance, powdered glass mixed with phosphorus. The head of the match is also made with grit, along with sulfur and an oxidizer. A tiny amount of heat that is created when you strike a match is caused by the friction of the glass powder grinding together. It converts the phosphorus into white phosphorus and it begins to catch fire. Match heads that were wet at one point simply won't light because of the careful chemical balance inside is all messed up. So if you're heading somewhere where there's a chance to get wet, either invest in waterproof matches or keep your matches in a waterproof container. Some people believe that a big fire can beat a shelter. In reality, though, even a fire made from large logs can't be an excuse to skip that important step. It can start raining heavily, and the flames will go out in no time. Plus, it's not that cool to sleep in the open. Wild animals aren't going to miss out on a delicious meal, like you. So it's always a good investment to take the time to build a shelter that will protect you from the elements and wild animals. There's a myth that all base layers work equally well. Unfortunately, this is not true. For example, cotton might lead to hypothermia if you rely on it as your primary base layer when the weather's cold. This fabric is great for wearing around the house, but it's better to use it in hot, dry climates. Once cotton gets wet, its insulating properties become non-existent. As soon as you start sweating, the moisture will soak into the cotton fibers and your clothes will begin cooling your body through conduction. And keep in mind that cotton fibers can keep up to 27 times their weight in water. And then, they'll store that liquid for up to 8 times longer than wool or synthetic fabrics. So the rule is, if it's cold enough for a onesie, then it's too cold for cotton. One of the most popular and dangerous survival myths depicted in movies and described in books is that you can suck the venom from a snake bite. In reality, it doesn't work. Even worse, it opens the affected person to a larger risk of infection by creating a bigger wound. And that's a wound with bacteria swarming human spit inside. Ew. Just put a pressure dressing on the wound and try to get medical help as fast as possible. Now, one might think that with a GPS, you'll never get lost. Of course, you should always take a GPS unit with you when you go hiking, if you have one. Keeping a GPS device with you will give you peace of mind, but you should keep in mind that these gadgets aren't fail-safe. You can misplace or break your device, or it can run out of battery. That's why you better have a map and compass, as well as the knowledge how to use them as a backup. After all, navigation isn't only about knowing which way to go. It's also about knowing where you are at the moment. There is a common belief that if you're stuck in a snowy environment without access to drinking water, consuming snow is the best way to rehydrate. However, this is a misconception and can actually lead to further dehydration. Why so? Well, when you eat snow, your body expends energy to melt and warm it up, which causes you to lose liquids faster. Plus, consuming snow can lead to hypothermia, a condition that is especially dangerous if you're alone in the wild. Snow might also contain harmful bacteria that can make you ill. If you have no other choice than to consume snow, melt it first using some sort of heat. Plus, avoid snow that doesn't appear fresh and white. Yeah, avoid that kind. If you experience frostbite, it's crucial to deal with it quickly. It's a dangerous misconception that you need to apply hot water to the affected area. In reality, it can worsen the damage. Instead, if medical help isn't immediately available, remove any wet clothing and submerge the frostbitten area in warm water. Prevent the affected area from refreezing and keep it elevated to minimize swelling. Apply a bandage to the area. If it's your finger or toes, wrap each one separately and place cotton pads in between them. They shouldn't touch. And remember this, never ever rub the frostbitten area. Should you find yourself lost in the wilderness, try to find a stream or small creek and follow it downstream until it joins a larger river. It'll likely lead you to civilization. Do not believe the myth that water is safe to drink if animals drink it. Always purify any water you find to avoid serious health problems. Even clear water can contain dangerous microorganisms. It's also a myth that it's safe to drink small amounts of salt water. This can actually lead to dehydration much more quickly than not drinking water altogether. Use salt water to cool down your body in hot weather, but don't drink it. So, you stumble upon a cave while lost in the wilderness, and it seems like an ideal shelter, especially if you have matches and can find wood nearby. But keep in mind that you should never build a fire inside the cave. The heat can cause the rocks to expand and potentially break, leading to a rockfall or landslide. Instead, build your fire outside the cave to stay safe and warm. When you realize you are lost during a hike, stop moving immediately. It may seem counterintuitive, but staying put and creating a shelter increases your chances of rescuers finding you. This approach also prevents you from dehydration caused by continuous movement. Now, you might have heard that if you come across an unfriendly swarm of bees, you should jump into the water and the buzzing creatures will leave you alone. The problem is that bees are patient. They will wait for you to resurface. Instead, run in a straight line as fast as you can until the bees give up the chase. Better yet, find a shelter in a car, house, or a public bathroom. Now, here are a few more survival tips as a bonus. Keep them in mind, and you'll be prepared for any kind of emergency. Upon encountering a snake, do not approach it and don't try to scare it away. Snakes are sensitive to vibrations, so making noise by raising your voice, clapping, or stomping can encourage it to retreat. If possible, simply walk away from the reptile. If you're falling from a cliff, and you can think, try to break your fall into several shorter parts to absorb the impact. Grabbing onto sturdy objects like bushes or rocks can slow your fall and increase your chances of survival. Good luck! If you've fallen through ice into freezing water, do not try to pull yourself out by grabbing the ice edge directly. It'll likely break. Instead, kick your legs to position your body horizontally and then wriggle out onto the ice. Once on the ice, stay spread out to distribute your weight and prevent further breaks. If you spot a whirlpool at sea, stay calm. Understand the direction of its spin, ride along its side, and use its current to propel yourself out of danger. If trapped, take a deep breath and wait for a chance to swim away as the whirlpool weakens. If trapped under debris during an earthquake, protect your respiratory system and conserve your air supply. Use your shirt as a makeshift hood to shield your face from dust and debris while you attempt to reach the surface. When stuck in quicksand, keep your head and arms above the surface. Wiggle your legs slowly to allow the quicksand to fill the space and create more room for movement. Stretch out on your back to increase your surface area and use gentle movements to free yourself. If you're out of kindling for starting a fire, use junk food, for example, chips. They can serve as effective substitutes for dry leaves due to their high fat content. Spaghetti noodles can also be used in a pinch.
Many sci-fi movies can make you believe that everything happening in space is accompanied by some kind of sound effect, which is a totally false misconception. In space, no one will hear you scream. There's no air in space. It's an almost perfect vacuum. And the sound waves don't travel through a vacuum. They can't reach your eardrums and make them vibrate, sending signals to your brain. But it's a good thing, especially for astronauts on spacewalks. If not for the quietness of space, they would be constantly overwhelmed by the noise of solar storms. Huge space explosions sure look super impressive. Whether they're scientifically possible or not is another question. Blasts on our home planet look the way they do because of air and gravity. You see, the air functions as an oxidizer, and the outward pressure makes everything fly into the air and then collapse back to the ground. But this process is very different in space, and it looks even cooler. If a blast occurred in space, there would still be some fire despite the lack of air, because some kinds of fuels can act as oxidizers. But it wouldn't be the fire you're imagining now. This cosmic fire would look like an expanding ball of light. It would be a seemingly never-ending process due to microgravity and the lack of air resistance. Nearby spaceships would be in grave danger since the shrapnel would fly outward until something eventually stops it. All comets have beautiful long tails. Huh? It's nothing but a popular misconception. In reality, comets are very difficult space bodies to spot. They usually spend large amounts of time far away from stars. There, in the darkness of space, they remain rather inactive and completely frozen. Comets only get tails once they come close to a star. That's when they start warming up. This process makes them form some kind of a cloudy atmosphere, which is called a coma, and a distinctive tail. The tail always points away from the star that influences the comet. It happens because the tail gets blown in the opposite direction by solar radiation and solar winds. That's why the tail can often be in front of the comet, not trailing after it. The inner and outer planets of the solar system are separated by the asteroid belt, a ring of asteroids and other debris and space objects orbiting around the Sun. While creating movies about space, filmmakers make sure to somehow use this region. Usually, they show the asteroid belt as an extremely crowded place with dense clouds of huge rocks you have to skillfully maneuver to get through to the other side. In reality, if you looked outside your spaceship while flying through this region of space, it would feel as if you're looking at the sky from Earth. All because of the ginormous distances in space. If you decided to cross the asteroid belt, there would be very little chance of a collision with a space object. Asteroids there are really spaced out and very far from one another. Black holes are giant, scary cosmic vacuum cleaners, they say. But in reality, black holes are more like fly traps. They don't look for things to munch on. Instead, they sit out there quite passively. Only when a star or any other object comes too close does a black hole spring into action. Even so, only those space bodies that cross a certain border get ripped apart. In fact, black holes aren't any different from any other celestial body since their pull is directly proportional to their mass. They can't swallow anything bigger than what their size allows. Even if our Sun was somehow replaced with a black hole as massive as itself, nothing would change for Earth or any other planet in the solar system. Gravitationally speaking, of course. Space battles in movies often involve using lasers. But if you were to see such a fight from up close, you would probably be disappointed. The thing is, it would be like nothing in movies. A laser beam is a concentrated burst of energy, and it could indeed be used for many purposes during a fight. But a real-life laser beam would be totally invisible in space since there wouldn't be any particles around to scatter the light and make the beam bright red or green or any other color. A human would be torn into pieces if they got into open space without a spacesuit. Well, contrary to popular belief, taking off a spacesuit during a spacewalk wouldn't be as dramatic as it's often pictured in movies. A person would just lose consciousness due to a lack of oxygen after 15 seconds of being in outer space without protection. But that's if this person breathed out as much air as possible. Otherwise, this oxygen would damage their lungs from the inside, making them rupture. After that, without the protection of the spacesuit, the pressure inside their body would drop. This would cause even more serious trouble. And even though this person definitely wouldn't burst, they wouldn't want to stay outside for too long. People often believe that in space you experience zero gravity, hence the weightlessness astronauts feel on the International Space Station. But that's not exactly true. Gravity is one of the most important forces that exist in the universe. Thanks to it, the Moon orbits Earth and the Sun doesn't float away out of our home Milky Way galaxy. Astronauts on the ISS do experience the effects of gravity, but that's not full-fledged. It's microgravity. The gravity on the space station is only 10% weaker than the gravity on Earth's surface, but astronauts are constantly in freefall. The spacecraft, people inside, and all the objects aboard keep falling forward, not down, but around our planet, following a specific orbit. And since they're all falling together, the crew and the stuff inside seem to be floating. That's why astronauts can move things as heavy as hundreds of pounds with their fingertips. And even though microgravity is often called zero gravity, they are very different things. A light year must mean time, right? Not really. Light years actually measure distance. NASA's definition of a light year goes like this: the total distance that a beam of light moving in a straight line travels in a year. And since light moves at a speed of 186,000 miles per second, a light year equals almost 6 trillion miles. It may seem as if the sun is always on fire. At least that's what it looks like in pictures and in movies. But in reality, our star is a giant ball of gas. Nuclear reactions happening in its core at all times make the sun burn. Every second, hundreds of millions of tons of hydrogen are converted into almost as much helium. During this process, huge amounts of energy are released as gamma rays. Then these rays turn into light. In other words, the sun does emit blinding light and incredible heat, but it's not actually on fire, because no oxygen is involved in the process. The speed of light is believed to be the ultimate barrier for people when it comes to space travel, and it's often thought to be impassable. There are many theories about what it might be like to reach that speed, but none of the equations account for going above it. And still, we know that at least one thing in the universe is faster than the speed of light: the rate of its expansion. Yep, the universe is expanding faster than the speed of light, baffling astronomers and casual sky watchers alike. Or at least we can say so in terms of the speed of different objects, like faraway galaxies relative to each other. At the moment, it's not something scientists understand well. The rate of the expansion of the universe is proportional to how far something is, too. The farther it is from us, the faster it's moving away. But even though we don't get the mechanics of it yet, we've got our proof, even though it's theoretical so far, that some particles might be able to travel faster than the speed of light. Some scientists think there could be more things out there in space that could challenge this speed barrier. All we need to do is find them.
So, if you have some matches and they've gotten wet, don't waste time drying them. The chemical compound can be changed by water and the matches will simply not work. To cure hypothermia, don't get into a hot tub. Fill some bottles with warm water and put them under your armpits. That will help you warm up better than the hot tub for sure. When you're thirsty and don't have much water, don't save it to last you longer. This can lead to further dehydration. Instead, drink every drop of it and try to find more water ASAP. So hydration is a must no matter the weather. But the idea that drinking hot liquids will warm you better is a myth. No amount of hot liquid can raise your body temperature. Plus, you can drink cold water faster than a hot drink, and that will help with hydration. Never poke a beehive because its inhabitants will get defensive. You think? And trying to escape by jumping into a lake or a river won't do any good. Bees will wait for you to resurface and attack you. After you poke the hive, run as fast as you can and don't look back. Sucking the venom out of a snake bite wound is likely to introduce more bacteria into the wound and even poison the person trying to help. Instead, take a photo of the snake, lie down while waiting for help, and try to stay calm. One of the most logical things to do when you're cold is to layer up. Now this is mostly true, but not if you put on cotton clothes. When cotton gets wet, it loses all its beneficial properties and can make you feel much colder. You should always wear wool clothes because they're much better insulators. Never drink cactus water. It can give you a nasty stomachache and even paralyze you, unless it's a fishhook cactus. But even then, it's too risky. Instead, try eating the fruits from the plant. They're full of juice. When you're chased by some predator, never jump off a cliff into the water. This is much more dangerous than meeting the predator. If you jump from a high place, the water surface will feel as hard as concrete, or the water might be too shallow and you'll hit the bottom. GPS is not the best navigational tool. It's reliable and easy to use, but it can break down. So you should learn how to use a map and a compass. They won't let you down if you know how to use them correctly. A puddle of water might look bad and smell a bit, but water is water, right? Well, unfortunately, boiling it can eliminate the bacteria, but not the heavy metals it contains. Those can cause serious health problems. A better option is to find some stream water to boil. Consuming random berries in the forest is dangerous. First, you need to check if they smell okay. If they have a pear or almond smell, avoid them. Next, get one, rub it on your forearm, and wait for 15 minutes. If your skin starts to itch, don't eat those berries. If you bite on a berry and it has a bitter, tingly, or soapy taste, spit it out. Never suck on stones to get some water. It is believed that when you're doing it, your body produces more saliva and it hydrates you. This is not true. If you don't drink water, nothing will help. Even worse, you can choke on the stone. Eating raw meat and fish is really dangerous. Yeah, we eat sushi, but it's normally saltwater fish, which is mostly safe. In the wilderness, always cook meat and fish before eating it. Moss doesn't only grow on south-facing surfaces. It can grow anywhere, depending on the temperature, so never use it to navigate. You'll be better off using some more reliable sources. For example, keep in mind that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Following birds to find water is a myth. They could be flying anywhere. Land animals like deer are a much better option. They usually know where the source of water is. Many survivalists claim that you should eat whatever animals around you are eating. Bad news, this is entirely false. Birds and squirrels consume berries that are super dangerous for us, but they don't harm them. And some animals eat poisonous plants to become venomous. Now, if a leech attaches to you, never burn it off. This can cause the animal to basically throw up directly inside your skin and cause massive infection. Try using a credit card to break the seal and remove the leech. Or if you're brave enough to wait for an hour, the parasite will fall off once it's fed. No matter how strong you are, punching a shark in the nose will not save you. It's a common belief that they have tons of nerves in the nose, and somehow that makes them vulnerable, but it has been proven wrong. If you find yourself in shark-infested waters, punching the animal in the gills or the eyes is much more effective than hitting the nose. After spending some time in the forest, you realize you're lost, and the first thing you start looking for is food. But you can actually live 6 weeks without food. The first thing you must do is find water and shelter from the elements. Do this and worry about the food later. Don't play possum when you encounter a bear. If it's a black bear, you won't be playing for long. Soon it'll be a reality. You should play possum only if it's a brown bear. Now remember the saying, if it's black, fight back. If it's brown, lay down. If it's white, good night. You shouldn't swim parallel to the shore if you find yourself in a rip current. Instead, try swimming at an angle away from the current and toward the shore. Remember, you shouldn't feel too much resistance while swimming. When you're lost, don't spend all your energy trying to make a fire. Try building a shelter first. This can protect you from the elements, and you'll have a place to rest and sleep after a long, exhausting day of surviving. Bonus tip: always build a bed in your shelter. You'll be warmer when you're off the ground. Now, being stuck in the desert will for sure make you hot. But to avoid getting even hotter, don't take any clothes off. The fabric serves as insulation and keeps you cool, unless it's a thick wool sweater, of course. Most people living at hot climates wear white clothes covering their whole bodies to avoid getting overheated. Eating snow can cause further dehydration. Your body will use more energy to melt the snow and thus more liquid. Take your time and melt the snow first, and then you can drink the water. Also, make sure you're only melting pure white snow. Discoloration means it contains something else besides water, especially if the snow is, yellow. If you stay in the cold for too long, you might get nasty frostbite. If you recognize the symptoms, never rub your hands together. It can damage your skin even more. The best thing to do is to seek immediate medical care. So, you see a cave, and the first thing you do is start a fire. Cave people did that all the time, so it must be okay, right? Wrong. The buildup of smoke can be very harmful. Instead, try covering yourself with some plant leaves to warm up. Getting stung by a jellyfish hurts a lot, and taking a leak on a jellyfish sting will not help you. It'll make the situation much worse. Wash the area with salt water and ask for medical assistance. It'll save you from an uncomfortable situation. Trust me on this.
Hey Mythbusters! Today we're debunking some classic space myths. Hop on the next space shuttle and let's get to the bottom of these tales once and for all. Picture this. You're floating weightlessly in space, sipping on a cup of delicious hot chocolate, when a peculiar thought pops into your head. Can you scream in outer space? And if yes, would anyone hear that scream?
If you've watched the movie Alien, then you know the answer to this one. You can't hear sounds in outer space.
It's not that sounds don't exist.
It's just that you can't hear them.
There's no one better to clarify this myth than Chris Hadfield. He's been on a couple of spacewalks during his life as an astronaut. And once you're out there in the darkness of space, you can't hear anything.
All you hear is silence. Complete silence.
But hey, just around the corner is a massive ball of explosion, aka the sun. We just can't hear the explosions happening because there's no medium for sound to travel through. It would be quite uncomfortable for an astronaut, though, if they could hear all the noises going on in outer space. Now, imagine you're zipping through space, feeling like a futuristic superhero, when a shooting star passes by your side. But wait, is it really a star? Unfortunately, shooting stars are not stars at all. They are small space rocks known as meteoroids, entering Earth's atmosphere and creating a stunning light show. Oh, and since we're debunking myths, let's head straight for another one. You've probably heard that meteors only crash into Earth on extremely rare occasions, like once every dinosaur extinguishing apocalypse. That's not true. Scientists estimate that about 48 tons of meteoritic material fall on Earth each day. But almost all of this material is vaporized in Earth's atmosphere. The bright trail we see in the night sky is what we popularly call a shooting star. Next time you make a wish upon a shooting star, remember, you're actually hoping on a tiny piece of space debris. It's not so romantic after all. Can we or can we not fly into the stratosphere on air balloons? Apparently, we can. The Earth's stratosphere starts relatively close to the ground, about 7 or 8 miles up from the Earth's surface, but it continues a long way up. If you were to fly yourself all the way into the stratosphere with some type of air balloon, just make sure you have really good equipment at hand. You'll need a special suit and some breathing devices because air starts to get pretty thin the higher you get. Of course, if you do go all the way up, you need to get a picture of the Earth's curvature. So take a chest harness with you where you can put a special camera or something like that. And how about you live stream the whole thing? That would be a first! Imagine it's been 102 days since you left Earth. You've adapted well to life in outer space, but something weird is happening to your body. You're getting taller. How is that even possible? Don't stress about it, it's completely normal. The truth of the matter is, you're not getting taller. This is what happens to your body when it's not under the effect of gravity. Our body has natural space between vertebrae and joints. On Earth, this space is almost completely squeezed due to the force of gravity. But in space, your body gets some time off of the pushing force of gravity and begins to stretch more and more. So yes, astronauts can grow up to 3% taller when they're on long missions. And here's a curiosity. NASA has that all covered when they're tailor-making spacesuits, of course. This way, astronauts will always have extra space in their suits. Once astronauts are back on Earth, the anti-gravity effect will wear off. So maybe they'll spend a few days wearing capri pants before it fits perfectly on their bodies again. Never have I ever pictured an airplane door bursting open mid-flight and a bunch of passengers being sucked into the atmosphere like flying feathers. Well, I'm betting most of you have had similar thoughts when getting inside a plane. Now imagine if this were to happen in outer space. Common knowledge says that if an astronaut is sucked out of an airlock, this person would be burnt to a crisp. Brace yourselves, because this is not only true, but the reality of it is way worse. According to astronaut Chris Hadfield, this is what would happen. The part of your body in the shade of the sun would experience temperatures of -418 degrees Fahrenheit, while the part of you getting sunlight would burn at around 480 degrees Fahrenheit. Your lungs would collapse, and your blood would start to boil like tea water. So you would burn, freeze, lose your ability to breathe, and boil. Yikes! How many times have you heard that astronauts have to work out every second of every day, otherwise they'll pass out? This is a complete myth. Remember we talked about gravity earlier? Due to the lack of gravity in outer space, our bodies don't have to do any heavy work. Our torsos don't have to sustain the weight of our heads. And we don't have to make any effort to move our legs because, essentially, there's no walking in outer space. Now imagine living like that for 6 months, or even a year of your life. Your muscles could turn into jello. That's why astronauts work out. They'll strap themselves and run on a treadmill, or they'll do some weightlifting in a special machine. This way, their muscles won't feel the lack of gravity too much. They do need to keep hydrated, though. You know what? If I was an astronaut, I'd ask NASA if I could take my super soft water flask up into space with me. You've probably heard that space smells like burnt steak or barbecue sauce. Now, as much as this sounds absurd, this myth is more true than it is false. Astronauts obviously can't smell space when they're in it because they can't take off their helmets. They usually smell it once a space vehicle docks and they open up a hatch. Apparently, what causes this smell is the presence of hydrocarbons that float around in space. Who would have thought, huh? Hey, smart people, let me ask you a question. Do you really think that if astronauts fly at the speed of light, they won't age a single second? I knew you'd say no. Let's get a few things straight. First of all, we haven't figured out how to operate vehicles at the speed of light. This would require an immense amount of energy, and we don't have the technology to do that. Second, even if we managed to send a human inside a spacecraft that traveled at the speed of light, this person would still age. They would age differently than the people who remained on Earth, that's a fact, but they would still age. Do you lot really think there's such a thing as immortality? Nah. If you've seen the first Avatar, then you certainly remember that humans only managed to get to Pandora because they traveled in cryosleep. In other words, they froze their bodies, put them in a cryobed, and traveled for years without aging. Yes, this sounds amazing, but we still don't have the technology to do that. Our bodies are mainly made out of water, right? And when you freeze water, it expands. That's why you should never leave soda cans unattended in your freezer. Right now, if we froze a person's body, the water inside of it would expand, harming tissues and organs. So no, we can't cryosleep our way into interstellar travel. Not yet, at least. Here's a crazy thought. What would happen if an astronaut took a drone with him on one of their spacewalks? Unless it's a NASA-designed drone, maybe the thing would freeze and burn like humans would if they went into space without a suit. But hey, a person can dream, can't they?
Check this out. Each zebra has its own unique pattern of stripes, just as people have their own unique fingerprints. Is it just a myth, or is it the truth? What do you think? It's true. Stripes on each zebra form a unique pattern, so it's impossible to find two zebras that are exactly the same. The stylish black and white pattern serves as an optical illusion to confuse and scare away their key enemies, predators and annoying insects such as tsetse flies or horseflies. Zebras are probably aware of how fabulous they are because they take time to groom one another. So, if you ever see two zebras standing close to one another, they aren't biting each other, it's a friendly beauty routine. Unlike humans, zebras can't scratch themselves on their own that easily, so they're just pulling loose hairs off each other. I do that. Although zebras live in herds, they usually create smaller family groups, a male, several females, and their offspring. And each member of that group is unique when it comes to their stripe patterns. All bats are blind. Would you buy it? Nah, it's just a myth. Being blind as a bat is a figure of speech, and it comes from the assumption that bats cannot see properly. In ancient times, also known as before the 21st century, people used to think that bats were blind, judging these charismatic creatures by their weird flight patterns. Many bats do use echolocation to navigate, but still, all of them can see. Here comes the next one. Lobsters are monogamous and stay together for a lifetime. True or false? What do you say? Well, sorry to spoil the romance, but it's just a myth made popular by a famous TV show. In real life, lobsters aren't monogamous at all. Dominant male lobsters mate with several females, and then, one by one, they vanish, only to reappear on a restaurant table with melted butter. No worries, the animal kingdom still has some hopeless romantics that remain faithful to their mates throughout their lives. Swans, gray wolves, beavers, bald eagles, gibbons, to name a few. You can get warts from handling frogs or toads. What do you think about this rumor? It's an old myth, probably related to the fact that both toads and frogs have bumps on their skin. Visually, these bumps remind of warts, but they're just glands that never secrete any substances that could cause humans to get warts. There are no amphibians that can give you warts, but shaking hands with another human who has them can. Moving on, turtles live inside their shells, and they can go outdoors anytime. Is it true or false? It's a myth. Those fairy tale and cartoon turtles pop out of their shells whenever they like. But in fact, saying that turtles live inside their shells is like saying that people live inside their own skin. A shell isn't just a separate empty space that serves as a costume. Although turtles can tuck their limbs inside for protection, it's actually an integral part of the turtle's anatomy. Take a look at the actual structure of its skeleton. The shell is fused to the bones of the skeleton, and the turtle can't live without it. The same goes for tortoises. One major key difference between turtles and tortoises is that tortoises spend most of their time on land, while turtles are designed to hang out in the water. That's why turtles have thinner and more water-dynamic shells, and tortoises' shells are more rounded and domed. Next, koalas' fingerprints are indistinguishable from humans. Does this sound realistic? Although it definitely sounds like it's made up, in fact, it's true. If you compare a human fingerprint to a koala's, you'd hardly be able to tell the difference even under a microscope. When scientists made this discovery, they warned the police because these fluffy little cuties are really capable of confusing forensics at crime scenes. The smart guys suppose that the koala's fingertip features have recently improved independently in their evolutionary history. Koalas' relatives like kangaroos and wombats don't have the same features. Koalas probably developed these complicated fingerprints because they help them grip onto leaves and branches more easily. Koalas are known as super fuzzy eaters. In fact, they prefer eucalyptus leaves of a particular age. Their sensitive fingers may have evolved as a tool to spot out the right leaves by their texture. Koalas aren't the only mammals with human-like fingerprints, by the way. Finger patterns of chimps and gorillas are also pretty complex. Ready to move on to the next rumor? Ostriches put their heads in the sand to hide from predators. Myth or true? What do you say? Nah, it's just a myth. Ostriches don't stick their heads in the sand when threatened. In fact, these guys don't bury their heads whatsoever. This myth has spread, thanks to that famous idiom, to hide one's head in the sand. In real life, ostriches have to dig holes in the sand for their eggs because they're flightless birds. To make sure they're evenly heated, ostriches put their heads in there to rotate the eggs from time to time. But ostriches still have some escaping mentality. When they face some threat, they can flop to the sand and stay perfectly still, pretending they aren't alive. Goldfish can't remember anything for longer than a second. Can it really be that bad? If you often say you have a goldfish memory as an excuse for forgetting something important, I have some bad news for you. Multiple studies have proven that goldfish can remember things for several months, if not more. Scientists from an Israeli university held the cutest experiment. For 1 month, they turned on classical music while feeding the fish. They believed that this practice would teach the fish to associate the melody with food. In 5 months, after the end of that training period, the fish still got excited and started looking for food every time they heard the music piece that had played earlier. Ah, Mozart! Hey, where's my food? It's not clear exactly where this myth came from or why it's so popular, but some people suggest that goldfish owners started it as they felt guilty about keeping their pets in tiny bowls. Cats and dogs are colorblind. Any thoughts on this one? Well, that's not true. Cats and dogs have much better color vision than we thought. This myth is probably just an exaggeration of the fact that each animal perceives colors differently than people. Studies reveal that both cats and dogs can see in green and blue. They also have more light-sensing cells in their eyes, also known as rods, than humans do. It means that cats and dogs can see way better in low light spaces. Dogs' eyes have fewer cones, those color-sensing cells. That's why scientists believe that dogs' approximate color vision is only about 1/7 as vibrant as humans. Sharks can only breathe and stay alive when they swim. Does this one sound real to you? According to a popular misbelief, sharks can breathe only while moving because swimming helps them push water over their gills. Although many kinds of sharks are designed this way, many others, like bottom-dwelling nurse sharks, don't need swimming to pump oxygen-rich water over their gills. Meanwhile, all sharks do lack swim bladders, so if they stop swimming, they'll probably sink to the bottom. But luckily, a shark's body can't be compressed. That's why rapid descents or ascents are safe for them. Sea otters hold hands so they don't drift apart while sleeping. Can you believe that? Yep, it's true. You can keep awing at it, but in fact, this way of sleeping has a practical purpose for them. Scientists suggest that sea otters develop this cute habit to stay close with their mating partners. If you hold your otter girlfriend's hand tightly all night, it will reduce the risk of her mating with another male while you're sleeping. Shameless. Also, holding hands helps otters to protect themselves from predators because they stay away from the land altogether. Now, if a human touches a bird nestling, its mother will abandon it. Myth or truth? What do you think? Luckily, it's just a myth. In fact, parent birds don't recognize their younglings by smell. So, feel free to put the cuties back in the nest. And always hang on to your otter girlfriend so you won't get eaten. Good advice.
You've probably seen at least one epic quicksand movie scene in your life. Watching a person gradually sink in the sand might cause tangible anxiety and even give you asthma sensations. Movies taught us to believe that falling into quicksand without any help around is fatal, and struggles only help to bring the sad ending closer. This myth may cause problems in real-life situations, so let's debunk it. When researchers studied quicksand, they revealed that it tends to thicken with time, but it still remains very sensitive to movements, even small ones. At higher stresses, quicksand can liquefy in a blink of an eye, but thankfully, a person who tries to swim out of the quicksand will never manage to drown completely. Humans just aren't dense enough. Quicksand is basically water mixed with fine sand and clay, and the density of the human body is twice lower. So, unless you're a superhero made of an unknown massive metal, there's no reason for panic. Remember that you would probably descend about up to your waist without going any further. Although you might feel the tension in your chest, the quicksand will allow you to float away. It might be harder to get out once the sand sediment begins to form. In this case, the quicksand's viscosity will increase and require solid amounts of force. So, let's say you've just stepped into quicksand. How to get out? First of all, if you're wearing a backpack or something heavy, drop what you're carrying immediately. If possible, get rid of your shoes too. It usually takes a minute for the mud to liquefy, so you can try to take a couple of quick steps back. But if you feel that you're stuck, avoid taking large steps. Movie characters usually begin to yell and their friends tug on them with all their might, but in fact, it's not so safe for your body. Just wriggle your legs around to create a space between the body and the quicksand. This way, water can flow down to loosen the sand. It's important to do it slowly and gently. And if you happen to sink up to your hips or higher, bend backward. This way, it will be harder to sink. Keep on floating on your back and gently pull your legs out of the trap. Once your legs are free, you can use your arms to smoothly propel yourself backwards as if you were swimming. When you find yourself at the edge of the quicksand, carefully roll to hard ground. Also, it will be good to carry a stick when you walk in risky areas. It's helpful when you need to detect upcoming quicksand, and if you're already stuck, you can put it horizontally behind your back. It will create a bridge on which you can lean while crawling out. By the way, an object with a higher density would still float on a quicksand. Aluminum, for example, is almost 1.5 times more dense than quicksand. When researchers placed an aluminum ball on top of a container with specially created quicksand, the ball remained on the surface. When they began shaking the container gently, the ball stayed floating on top. But when they shook it a bit harder, the ball sank to the bottom. So, if, say, you dropped a pack of cash on quicksand and you want it back, pull it very carefully using long tongs. And avoid touching the mud itself. Phew! Finally got out of the sandy trap, but here crawls a creepy snake and another movie myth. Green anacondas are one of the largest snakes in the world, and females are usually much larger than males. But the very anaconda from a series of movies measures 40 feet. That's too long even for this extraordinary creature. In real life, the biggest anaconda ever found was 33 feet long and weighed about 880 pounds. Meanwhile, the average length for an adult female anaconda varies between 15 and 16 feet. Anacondas prefer living in swamps and slow-moving streams, mostly in the tropical rainforests of the Amazon and the Orinoco basins. The green anaconda belongs to snakes called constrictors. These snakes are not venomous. Instead, they wrap their bodies around their prey and give it a final hug. Let's say you refused to hug anaconda and continued walking, and suddenly you get bitten by a venomous snake. Everyone knows you should just brace yourself, suck the venom out of the bite, and continue the journey as if it never happened, right? Wrong. This old-school method might seem very epic, but today it's known to cause more harm than good. A venomous snake bite is basically a poorly made injection. The venom doesn't just stay in a bubble under the skin, it gets into the lymphatic system, and it can hardly be removed by suction. But if you manage to do so, you still risk poisoning yourself. Although, technically, swallowing venom is relatively safe, it's still a bad idea. If you have any open sores or cuts in any place from the mouth to the stomach, the venom can still enter the bloodstream and cause damage. Walking is also a bad idea. It's recommended to stay as still as possible to slow down the venom traveling through your lymphatic system. Don't wash the bite. Doctors may use this area to quickly identify the type of snake that bit you, and don't try to change clothing. Any unnecessary movement may cause the venom to move into the bloodstream more rapidly. You arrived at the hospital just in time and the doctors helped you. But unfortunately, your arch enemy is waiting around the corner. He sprinkles a couple of chloroform drops on his handkerchief, puts it on your nose, and nothing happens because we're not in a movie. Chloroform is presented as a common tool to instantly knock someone out in almost every movie where it appears. But in reality, this substance doesn't work so quickly. Even at higher doses, it takes at least 5 minutes for chloroform to start working. And several drops, as it usually appears on the screen, are not considered a high dose. Real doctors widely used chloroform as an anesthetic in the previous century, but it had many unwanted side effects. So later, its usage declined after the development of safer and faster inhalation anesthetics. You run away from the enemy and find yourself trapped in a storage room. There are no windows, but you find a ventilation hatch door. You're not claustrophobic. You can easily escape through a ventilation shaft, right? Nope. Time to debunk another movie myth. Ventilation shafts can be really narrow and dangerous. If you manage to get inside, you'll have to deal with some filters, a fan, and other obstacles. Also, metal edges on the inside can be pretty sharp, which doesn't make the journey safer. And besides, most ventilation shafts are not designed to carry the weight of a human, so it might just fall apart under your body. No big deal. The enemy captures you and takes you on a plane. No time to explain. Let's go skydiving. You're about to shout "Hasta la vista, baby" to your enemy. But unlike in some of the movies, in real life, you cannot talk while you're in free fall. It's impossible to be able to talk whilst 120-mile-per-hour winds are all up in your face. That's why skydivers communicate through hand signals and facial expressions. You land and find yourself in medieval London. But wait a minute, why are all these people so tidy? Thanks to movies, many people imagine those that lived in the Middle Ages as being very dirty and smelling even worse. The myth claims that only rich people bathe and did it only a couple of times a year. But in fact, it's not the case. Unpleasant body odor was associated with sin. So people were expected to do their best to stay fresh, no matter how rich they were. Rich people could afford to immerse themselves in tubs of heated water, while the lower class washed with wet clothes. Also, public saunas and baths were quite common in the Middle Ages, and they were really popular among the common folk too. People went there for the sake of hygiene and socializing, just like in the era of ancient Roman baths. The city of Bath in England was one of the popular destinations. Crowds came from all parts of the country to tidy up and enjoy its famous natural hot springs. Once upon a time, in the deep blue sea, there was a giant monster called the Kraken. People believed it lived in the waters near Norway and Greenland. The first time anyone wrote about the Kraken was a long, long time ago. It was a man named Erik Pontoppidan from Denmark in a book called The Natural History of Norway. He wrote that the Kraken looked like a huge octopus or cuttlefish, and it could pull ships down to the bottom of the ocean. Later on, people started to imagine the Kraken as a giant squid. Even today, the story of the Kraken is still very popular, and it can be found in books, movies, or games. The stories surrounding the Kraken might sound like nothing more than local folklore or myths, but in 2004, the first giant squid was photographed. This amazing discovery was made by a team of Japanese scientists who had been working for years to capture a live giant squid on camera. They used a baited line with a camera attached to it to lure the giant squid to the surface. They also used a special lure that mimicked the light patterns of a small creature to attract the giant squid. After several days of waiting, the team finally got lucky. The image showed the giant creature's long tentacles and large eyes, as well as its distinctive body shape. It didn't stop there, though. In 2012, another team of scientists, this time from National Geographic, filmed a live giant squid for the first time in its natural habitat. This footage gave the world a much better understanding of the giant squid and its behavior. You've surely heard about this next myth too. It was said to be the most beautiful and wealthy city to ever exist. Its entrance was decorated with marble statues. The architecture of this city was sturdy and imposing. The depictions of Greek deities beautifully painted could be seen almost everywhere. The city has been the subject of debate for historians and fiction writers alike. We still have very little information on the location of the ancient city of Atlantis. That is, if it even existed. Since it was supposedly swallowed by the sea in its entirety, it's no wonder some curious minds linked it to other mysterious locations on Earth, even to the Bermuda Triangle. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's not yet confirmed that Atlantis truly existed. The idea of an island sinking into the sea due to an unknown disaster is a widespread idea in mythology and popular culture. However, it is possible that the story of Atlantis was inspired by actual events, such as the sinking of islands like Helike. On this island, located in the Gulf of Corinth, there was a thriving ancient Greek city. It was known for its prosperity and wealth, and it was also an important spiritual headquarters for the Greeks. The city was home to a building dedicated to the immortal Poseidon, and it was believed that he protected the city himself. However, one fateful night in 373 BCE, a massive earthquake struck the region. The ground shook violently, and the city was swallowed up by the sea in a matter of minutes. The residents of Helike, unable to escape the disaster, all disappeared under the waves. The sinking of Helike was a great tragedy for the ancient Greeks, and it was seen as a punishment from the higher spirits. Many believed that the city's prosperity and pride had angered them, and they had punished the city by destroying it. The city remained underwater for centuries, and it was not until the 20th century that it was rediscovered by modern archaeologists. Today, the most part of the city is still underwater. While we're on the subject of Greek myths, we have to talk about the famous city of Troy. This was a legendary city in ancient Greece. Scientists believed for years that it had been made up by writers and philosophers. According to an ancient Greek legend, the city was founded by the Trojan prince Paris, who stole Helen, the wife of King Menelaus of Sparta, and brought her back to Troy. This event sparked a huge conflict between the Greeks and the Trojans that lasted for 10 years. One of the most famous stories from the Trojan conflict is the tale of the Trojan horse, a large wooden horse that the Greeks built and left outside the city gates as a gift to the Trojans. The Trojans, believing the horse to be a symbol of peace, brought it into the city. But inside the horse, there were Greek fighters who, once inside the city, opened the gates and let the rest of the Greeks in. The Trojans had no escape this time, and they were ultimately defeated. The city was rediscovered in the 19th century in modern-day Turkey. It's located near the Scamander River. Today, this region is an archaeological site and draws a lot of tourists each year. The following myth is indeed sad, but it might have some truth to it too. It is said that years ago, the Solomon Islands in the Pacific Ocean, there lived a man that was deeply in love with his wife. The woman, however, decided to leave him for another man and moved to the nearby island of Tionamanu. Heartbroken and filled with rage, the man sought out a curse to take his revenge. He set out on a journey in a canoe, determined to bring destruction to the island where his wife had fled. Upon arriving at Tionamanu, the man planted 2 taro plants. One he kept for himself. According to the instructions, once his own plant began to sprout, disaster was supposed to strike the island. And it did. The man watched from a mountaintop as a series of waves smashed into the island, causing it to sink beneath the waves. Tionamanu was a real place, but it's not entirely clear when it disappeared. It is said that waves alone could not have washed away this small but tall volcanic island. But an undersea earthquake could have probably done it. The island was balanced on the edge of an unstable underwater slope. The most reasonable explanation is that a huge earthquake shook the region, which made the weak foundation collapse and caused the island to sink beneath the waves. This island-sized landslide would have pushed a lot of water out of the way, which would have created a series of massive mega tsunamis. So, although those vengeful waves could have occurred, they were most likely the result of another event. And that sad man, with his curse fulfilled, returned to the Solomon Islands with his heart still heavy after the loss of his wife. We won't leave the ocean waves just yet, but we're heading over to Hawaii. A legend has it that once upon a time, there was a Hawaiian higher spirit named Pele. She was the protector of volcanic fire and was said to have arrived at the islands to flee from her older sister. To conceal herself, Pele hid in various hideaways on each of the islands until she finally concealed herself in a pit at Kilauea. This is why, according to the legend, Kilauea is known as Hawaii's active volcanic center today. The story may be visually stunning, but in reality, volcanism is caused by the superheated mantle that triggers a lot of melting beneath the surface of our planet. People also say that Pele's tears and hair can be found scattered around the volcano. However, reality has more to do with physics than with folklore. When lava cools rapidly, particularly when it gets quenched in water or a small amount of it flies through the air, it turns into volcanic glass. When it stretches and cools down, it can sometimes form tear-shaped droplets, or it can get stretched so thin that it begins to look like strands of hair. We know today that Hawaii is a volcanic region known for its fire mountains, with huge streams of lava shooting up from active vents. It's no wonder it became an ideal origin place for the story of two sisters and their sibling rivalry.
Now, as much as we love epic space battles with blasters cutting through the black void and causing cheerful booms, that's not exactly what happens when something explodes in the big black. Space is basically vacuum, meaning it has no oxygen, and oxygen is an essential part of any process of burning we have here on Earth. You might argue that stars can burn and explode into supernova, but that's not exactly true either. Stars don't rely on oxygen, so they're not burning. There are constant thermonuclear reactions going on inside them. So a spaceship can only explode like that if it has a nuclear power plant installed in it. If it doesn't, then the only special effect you get is a brief flash that disappears in the blink of an eye. Liquid oxygen, which is often on board spaceships, is very quick to burn out in the vacuum of outer space. As for the boom, oxygen plays a crucial role here too. Sound only travels thanks to molecules of air bumping into each other. Since there's no air in space, the whole scene would be pretty much absolutely silent. And that's not a bad thing either. Just imagine how deafening would the sun be if the sound could travel in space. Despite what many sci-fi directors want us to believe, there's no dark side to the moon. Our satellite is tidally locked with Earth, meaning it's always turned to us with one side, while the other always looks away. The sun is much farther from us than the moon, and we're both turning round and round, warming and lighting this side and that in turn. It means that once in every short while, the moon is lit by the sun from either side. It's just that we can't see it from where we are. While things appear weightless in outer space, there's actual gravity all over the place. It becomes weaker the further you get from a heavy object, like our planet, but it's still there. In fact, there's not a single place in the universe that isn't affected by gravity of this or that cosmic object. Everything that has mass has gravity as well. Yes, even you and me. But space objects are so massive that they tug smaller things towards them. That's why the planets of the solar system orbit around the Sun, and our whole Milky Way galaxy orbits around its own center. Scientists believe there's a supermassive black hole there, about 4 million times heavier than the Sun, which keeps all the stars and systems from flying apart. Our movie hero leaves the orbit of Mars on their trusty spaceship and heads on towards Jupiter. Their face is grim and determined, even though they know what threat awaits them ahead – the asteroid belt. They pitch and yaw, dodging the asteroid flying at enormous speeds toward the spacecraft, but one of them still hits it. No, just a scratch, thankfully. Finally, our hero leaves the danger zone and wipes the sweat from the brow with a shaking hand. Sounds familiar, but couldn't be further from the truth. Asteroids in the belt between Mars and Jupiter are so few and far between that if you ever travel through it, you might not even encounter one the whole way. There are about 1.5 million sizable space rocks flying there, give or take 500,000. But let's not forget, space is a vast place. The distance between two asteroids of any significant size would be millions of miles. So a space chase with two ships weaving between floating rocks would be quite boring in there. Space is often depicted as a black, cold, and desolate place, especially when a movie astronaut leaves the safety of their spaceship. Everything about this description is okay, except for the cold part. It's only true if you find yourself in some really far corner of our galaxy that has no nearby stars. But if you're, for example, in the Earth's orbit and directly facing the Sun, the temperature in the cosmic vacuum could reach a scorching 250 degrees. That's why spacesuits are white. This color reflects light better than any other. Still, the temperature at your back, which isn't exposed to the sun's rays, can be really freezing indeed. Heat doesn't spread equally through space, so if you're not turned towards a heat source, you get very, very cold. Speaking about the sun, it somehow always appears yellow in movies. The fact is, the color we see from Earth is an optical illusion created by our planet's atmosphere, just as the blue sky during the day. The light from the sun spreads in the atmosphere and gets distorted, making colorful spectacles at dawn and dusk. In the vacuum of space, there's nothing to reflect the light, so the sun appears as it really is – white. That ball of glowing gas is that hot. There's a bright flash in the sky, followed by a tail of smoke, and a red-hot space rock crashes into the ground, leaving a huge, charred crater after impact. Well, although the smoky tail and the crater are partly true, meteorites don't really have a chance to become that hot while falling. Meteorite is an asteroid that somehow entered the Earth's atmosphere and survived the friction enough to fall on the surface. This happens pretty often. We just don't usually see those rocks because they're normally quite small and fall into uninhabited areas. But even if one falls within a city, the crater would appear because of the sheer speed of the meteorite, not its heat. They do get much hotter because of friction, yet not so much as to burn everything on the ground on impact. As much as we want to believe in instant communication between spaceships and planets, it's not possible, at least not yet. Modern communication systems rely on radio signals that have a pretty slow speed compared to the vast expanses of space. It would take years for such a signal to travel even 1 light year, let alone hundreds and thousands. If you want to send a message to a galaxy far, far away, be prepared to wait a couple of millennia and then a couple more to receive a reply. On that note, space is not as crowded and full of events as is often shown on the silver screen. It's mostly a rather lonely place, where planets, stars, and other objects are separated by billions of miles of nothingness. Even if you have a spaceship that can travel at the speed of light, most of the time you'll only see black void full of stars and planets far away. The distances are enormous out there, even between the closest objects. For a better understanding, the Moon, which you can see so well on a clear night, is about 239,000 miles away. It's like traveling around the Earth almost 10 times in a row. Warp drives that can distort space-time and get you to a distant corner of an alien galaxy in the blink of an eye, that's a staple of any space opera. Spaceships capable of such a feat are always shown as instantly accelerating from zero to faster than light. According to the law of physics, people on board should, well, at least be pushed into their seats hard. More strictly speaking, no one would be able to survive such an acceleration because it's too many G's on a fragile human body. Until we find a way to reduce the effects of overload, we can't even start thinking of space warps. Water isn't the rarest and most precious resource in the universe. In fact, there's a humongous space cloud several million light-years away from us that consists entirely of water. Its reserves would be enough to fill all our oceans 140 trillion times over. And many planets, some even in our solar system, seem to have liquid water on them. The most precious resource in space is life, and that requires a lot more stuff to appear than just liquid water. Astronauts are often shown working out on the ISS and sci-fi space stations, and that much is true, they do need physical activity. But the reason isn't that they need strong bodies to work in space. The gravity out there is much weaker, and astronauts don't use their muscles as much as on Earth. So when they come back to the surface, gravity hits them as a sledgehammer, and their bodies feel squishy. To alleviate those effects, they train every day. Although they say we can see millions of stars on a clear starry night, that number is much more modest, about 3,000. All the rest are other objects that are also luminous and mistaken for stars, planets, distant galaxies, and even artificial satellites. They're simply being illuminated by real stars, just like the moon, and become seen. But because they're that far away, we can't tell if they're stars or not. Still, you gotta admit, it's all still pretty cool.
There are things about your body you know for sure, or don't you? Can you guess what exactly is a myth or fact? 1 point is for each correct answer. Let me know your score. Brown eggs are more nutritious than white eggs. Myth or fact? Myth. There is no study saying brown eggs are healthier than white eggs. The only difference is the color of the eggshell. The color of the eggshell doesn't affect its nutrition or quality. That is related to the type of chicken. Chickens with white earlobes tend to have white eggs. Have you heard that a large amount of the dust in your home is actually decanted skin? Not cool, I know. Do you think this is a myth or a fact? This is a myth. You're not just mopping your skin flakes from the floor. Many other components make the house dust. Fibers, hair, building materials, mold, pollen, insect body parts, and ash are some of them, according to the study made in Canadian houses. This makes sense because a house nearby a busy highway or in a renovation area has more dust than a house in the middle of a forest. Skin is our largest organ. Is this a fact or myth? It's a fact. You might think for a second that the intestine can be quite large when you unfold it, but nope. Skin wins the contest. An adult carries around 8 pounds and 22 square feet of skin. Can't think of us without a skin. It's not just there to cover our bodies, it has an essential role in protecting us too. You can't breathe and swallow at the same time. Myth or fact? It's a fact. Maybe you already knew the correct answer, but you tried it anyway after reading this, so see it for yourself. So in your throat, there are 2 passageways important for your survival. I'm putting aside the fancy medical names, and I'll refer to those 2 as airway and food pipe. They prevent breathing and swallowing simultaneously. Otherwise, food would enter the airway and cause severe complications. This doesn't always go as planned. That's why sometimes you end up coughing and preventing the piece of food from reaching the lungs. As well as having unique fingerprints, humans also have unique tongue prints. Is this a myth or fact? Fact! The human tongue is magnificent enough in its features that make us taste the food. It's also unique in its texture. People use biometric systems like fingerprints, voice scans, and iris scans for authentication. They are important to the identification and verification phases. Tongue print is unique, so it's very hard to copy it. It can be used as a biometric system tool too. What if people started using this system in their daily lives for safety reasons? Imagine locking a safe or your phone with a tongue print. An adult spends 3 hours in the bathroom every week. Do you think this is a fact or a myth? It's a fact. A poll by scientists reveals that an average adult spends 3 hours and 9 minutes on the toilet every week. This is more than the time they spent exercising. Take your sweet time, no need to rush. You swallow 8 spiders a year while sleeping. Myth or fact? Don't believe it. Lucky for us, and for the spiders of course, this is not true. Fear no more, and have a good night's sleep. Most spiders don't deliberately come near humans. Plus, vibrations coming from a sleeping person might be uncanny for them. Or maybe the spider just lives in the habitat. It thinks that you are flatmates sharing a room. As long as there is actual evidence, I call this a myth. Your thigh bone can resist thousands of pounds of force. Do you think this is a myth or a fact? Yes, this is a fact. People generally refer to it as tight bone, but its actual name is femur bone. This bone is located on the upper part of your leg. Experts say that this bone is hard to break. It's one of the 2 strongest bones in our anatomy. The first one is the temporal bone of the skull. If you wondered about the first one. Anyway, a tight bone can support 30 times more of your body weight. Maybe it's because the femur bone is the longest and largest bone in the human body. Do you believe that shaving your hair makes it grow back thicker? Fact or myth? Watch how I debunk that myth. Experts say shaving doesn't affect the thickness of the hair. The hair's head didn't remove, so the root is still there. You only shave the upper part. After a shave, the hair grows bluntly, because it's been cut. That's why you may feel it's getting thicker. It's safe to eat food that's been on the floor for 5 seconds or less. Is this a fact or a myth? Sorry for blocking the best way you justify eating something that fell on the floor. There's no such thing as the 5-second rule. Researchers found that a substantial amount of bacteria transferred to the food within 5 seconds. The moisture of the food directly affects contamination. Imagine you drop a slice of watermelon and chips on the floor. I don't know why you're eating both together or how you end up dropping them both. But let's continue with this example anyway. The watermelon will have more contamination than chips. Because watermelon has more moisture in it, the surface of the watermelon is more open to transferring bacteria. Blondes and redheads may soon disappear. Myth or fact? An easy one, right? This is a myth. Red or blonde-colored hairs are connected to recessive genes. They can be carried from one generation to another without creating the hair color of the carrier. If both parents have the correct recessive genes, the chances are high that the next generation will have blonde or red hair. These genes are rare, but populations still have those genes carried out, so they won't get lost forever. For that to happen, literally everyone on the planet who carries that gene must disappear. So, the chances are low. Drinking coffee dehydrates you. Is it a fact or myth? Myth! You can enjoy your morning coffee. Okay, you may visit the bathroom more frequently after drinking coffee, but it doesn't mean you're losing more water. There are numerous studies made about the effects of caffeine. Some of these studies revealed that drinking a reasonable amount of coffee a day doesn't increase the risk of dehydration. Eating yogurt helps your digestion. Do you think this is a fact or just another myth? A fact, but with the right choice of yogurt. Yogurt is food containing probiotics. They are the good bacteria that make everything flow smoothly in your gut. Eating yogurt alone may not be enough to have a healthy digestive system. It supports the digestive system positively. Keep in mind, though, not all yogurts are equal. Some of them have sugar in them, or they come with toppings like candy or cookies. Go for the classic ones. Your hair will grow faster if you have it cut more often. Fact or myth? We were always told not to cry too much over the hair we lost because it would grow back faster. Unfortunately, the hair growth rate doesn't depend on how often you get a haircut. The average hair growth rate is 0.01 inches per day. Plus, many factors affect it: age, hormones, and even the time of year. Knowing this new fact may make some people postpone their hairdresser appointments.
Some people are still afraid of sailing through this region because more than 50 ships and 20 planes have disappeared here since the mid-19th century. You won't find this place on a regular paper map, as it's not an official region of the Atlantic Ocean. It's just an imaginary area of water in the shape of a triangle near the southeastern coast of the US. Right now, we're going there to debunk all the myths and fairy tales about this place. The most popular theory says that the ancient city of Atlantis was once located where the Bermuda Triangle is now. It was inhabited by a more advanced civilization than the rest of the people on Earth. In this area, some mysterious crystals were installed that generated infinite energy and powered the entire city. Then the city sank, and its ruins still lie on the bottom of the Atlantic. But among its ruins, there are still places where crystals work. They're the reason for most disappearances. Crystals randomly release beams of energy towards the surface and disable the electronics of planes and ships. There are no facts to support this theory. Someone once wrote this legend in a book about the Bermuda Triangle, and some people have been supporting it ever since. However, there's some oddity associated with electronics. Astronauts of the International Space Station noticed the Earth's magnetic field is weakened in the Bermuda Triangle area. This field is a shield that protects us from solar radiation. Above the triangle, the particles of the sun's rays move faster than in any other part of the planet. This causes unstable work in the electronics of satellites flying in the atmosphere of Earth. It doesn't apply to ships and planes, though. There's also a theory that the Bermuda Triangle is the center of a magnetic anomaly causing navigation errors, but regular checks of the magnetic map of this region don't reveal any issues. You arrive at the place, the water is calm, and there's no coming storm in sight. You look at the compass and see the arrow moving from side to side. Oh no, it's begun! Panic rises within you, and you quickly turn the steering wheel of the ship to sail away from this place. Oh, stop. There has long been an explanation for the strange compass behavior in this area. The Bermuda Triangle is one of the rare places on the planet where true north and the magnetic one are in the exact same direction. True north is the geographic north pole of our planet. Magnetic north directs to the north magnetic pole, which constantly wanders around the Earth. Sometimes these poles coincide, and the straight line that connects north and south is called the agonic line. If you fall into this line, your compass will behave strangely. It won't point exactly to the north. Imagine that you're the captain of a ship sailing in the Bermuda Triangle at the beginning of the 20th century. You need to know where north is to get to the shore. You look at the compass, and it points incorrectly. You're deviating from your original course and sailing in the wrong direction. There's the Caribbean Sea, near the triangle, peppered with small islands. The sea floor here isn't deep. The ship can get in shallow waters, and now the ship is stuck on a shoal, and you have no idea where you are. If this were the 21st century, the ship's captain would be able to reach the shore using GPS and other modern navigation. But the most interesting thing is that the compass would work correctly this time, since the magnetic North Pole hasn't already coincided with the true one for a long time in the territory of the Bermuda Triangle. The agonic line is somewhere far away from here. There are no problems with navigation now, but for some reason, this is where ships disappear. In fact, not just here. Throughout the Atlantic Ocean, there are places where many more ships have gone. The Bermuda Triangle is not even in the top 10 of such places. One of the main reasons why many ships are lost here is that one of the most popular shipping routes in the Atlantic passes through the Bermuda Triangle. And the more ships in one place, the more shipwrecks. Simple probability. Other theories say there's a space-time rift in this region. Ships and planes fall into this rift and end up in the past or the future. But for some reason, there's not a single proof of this myth. There's no reason to think that the rift is hidden somewhere here. The base of an extraterrestrial civilization is located in the Bermuda Triangle. Visitors from other galaxies steal sea vessels along with the crew, so no one finds the wreckage of the ships. This is also a popular myth that has no scientific justification. Sunken ships are not found here, as there's one of the deepest trenches in the world. Any sinking ship will sink to a depth of about 19,000 feet. The enormous pressure and distance makes it difficult to find the ships. Also, the Puerto Rico Trench is nearby. In some spots, it's as deep as 27,500 feet. The Kraken lives somewhere in the triangle. It's a huge squid that sinks ships, and is also a legend that sailors tell each other. However, gigantic squids live in the depths of the ocean. They can grow to the size of half a train car, but no cases have been recorded where they have sunk a large vessel. And in the area of the Bermuda Triangle, they've never even been seen. People in the past didn't know about the existence of these creatures, so when they saw them for the first time, they described them as huge, terrible monsters. Giant squids are some of the most elusive creatures on Earth, and scientists had to use sonar equipment to find them. They don't like to leave the dark depths and are likely to be afraid of the sound of any ship. A more realistic hypothesis about the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle is methane. Large deposits of this gas can be found under the seafloor of this region. From there, methane is released into the water. It takes the form of huge bubbles that quickly rise to the surface. Then, the gas makes the water almost boil, creating waves that sink ships. The theory is quite realistic, but numerous studies still haven't confirmed the presence of an increased concentration of methane in the region. Last time this phenomenon occurred was 15,000 years ago. Another credible theory implies the appearance of rogue waves. Imagine a clear, calm sea without wind. Suddenly, you hear a loud hum. In just a few seconds, a huge wave, 100 feet tall, appears from the calm surface and falls on your ship. Some scientists believe rogue waves are created by a surface sea current colliding with a strong headwind. There's a version claiming the wave is born because of the collision of warm and cold currents. But the most interesting theory says the waves are formed by kinetic vampirism. Under certain natural conditions, waves can exchange kinetic energy. And among all the waves, there will be one, the vampire, that gets the energy of all the others. When it accumulates enough energy, the vampire wave spills it out. This explains the force of the impact and its sudden disappearance. This phenomenon is observed in all the waters of the world's oceans, but there's no evidence that it occurs most often in the Bermuda Triangle. If rogue waves appeared there, it was not during a calm. A restless sea is the main reason for ship disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. Severe storms and hurricanes are a frequent thing there, because the Bermuda Islands is an area of high pressure that diverts thunderstorms towards the triangle. Huge waves simply overturn ships, and thunder and lightning flashes disable planes' electronics. There's nothing mysterious about this. Storms and ship disappearances occur in all oceans, but a lot of legends were made exactly about the Bermuda Triangle. It all started in the middle of the 20th century, when a book was published that tells us that Atlantis lies in the waters of the triangle. No proof was given, but people liked this mysterious theory so much, they began to build upon it. They started making documentaries about it and writing new books. Each material devoted to the fantastic nature of the triangle was based not on facts, but the theories of other written books and films. And when a topic is popular, you can make money on it. Readers enjoy it, and authors are rewarded.
Now, at some earlier stages of research, scientists reconstructed the megalodon looking like a bigger, just a little more dangerous version of a great white shark. Movies then followed suit, added a couple of details on their own, and ta-da! We've got a marine giant that could grow up to 90 feet long. Well, hold on. Megalodons were usually between 50 and 55 feet, sometimes growing up to 60 feet. For comparison, a bowling lane is 60 feet long, a school bus is around 45 feet, and an average person is 5 feet 10 inches tall. So yeah, not bad megalodon, but still not 90 feet. Its weight was around 50 to 60 tons, which is something like 10 adult elephants or even a Boeing 737. That's just their females, though. The ladies were almost twice as big as the males. Another movie versus reality thing, the megalodon had nothing to do with a great white shark. The closest they could be is cousins, because megalodon, in fact, is the last descendant of a completely different lineage of sharks. Plus, its kind is around 3 times bigger than an average great white. It has a shorter nose and a much flatter jaw that almost looks like it's squashed. Also, Meg's pectoral fins are longer than those of the great white sharks. Ancient predators ate a lot, so they needed something to support their weight. They both had an excellent sense of smell, though, so even in prehistoric times, it wasn't a good idea to go swimming with a chunk of raw meat in hand. And it certainly isn't safe now. Whether the Meg's hiding somewhere in the depths, which some still believe is true, or it's gone forever, younger cousins will be there waiting. Also, both of them like to go after big marine mammals, so they would certainly have things to do together. That is, until the Meg got moody and accidentally ate its friend. You never know. These guys had a different hunting style. Great whites prefer to dive straight toward their prey and find the softest spots, like exposed legs or underbelly. Megalodon aimed for the fins and tail because of its almost 10-foot jaws and what's considered to be the strongest bite ever. Its teeth could pierce almost anything. Sometimes an entire tooth would be found embedded in the bone of some bigger animal, such as a whale. Without the main parts they use for swimming, poor sea animals were then helpless and unable to escape. Yet whales were just a smaller part of the megalodon's diet. Seals, sea cows, squids, dolphins, other sharks, the good old Meg probably wouldn't say no to some random school of smaller fish swimming into its mouth either. Nothing better than a good snack after a big tasty dinner. Even those giant turtles weren't safe within their thick shells. The Meg probably took those as a dare challenge on a daily basis. Such a diverse diet, and in big amounts. Megalodon would eat about 2,500 pounds of food every day. No wonder it dominated the ocean. Almost 300 teeth in 5 rows, and we're talking about sharp chompers that could grow up to 7 inches long. Even its name stands for giant tooth. Hey, I'm thinking maybe it had a cousin, orthodontia, which means either crooked teeth or deep pockets. Still, Megalodon would change thousands of teeth over a lifetime. Since Meg's teeth weren't that strong, they would often fall out. Then it would get new ones within 1 to 2 days, so it could continue its hunting sessions without any serious interruptions. The same thing happens with modern sharks as well. New teeth replace damaged or worn out ones. Those teeth falling out were the only thing that helped scientists do any research on the megalodon at all. They found them all around the world. Yep, megalodons were quite some travelers. They lived in all oceans, and their fossils were found on all continents except Antarctica. What, too cold? Since their skeletons were not made of bone but of cartilage, teeth are the only evidence they've ever even existed. They gave scientists an insight into a lot of things, including size. Even with modern sharks, scientists determine their size by the dimensions of only one tooth, and do the same with the Meg. Megalodon had the strongest bite of all living creatures on Earth. It would definitely be fun to see the clash between the Meg and, say, T-Rex. Sadly, they missed their chance to meet and establish some long-term friendship since dinosaurs went extinct over 60 million years ago. Meg, on the other hand, terrified all the inhabitants of the seas and oceans from 23 to 2.5 million years ago. Where could Megalodon live these days? Well, it would probably love the places modern sharks go to, such as Florida, Hawaii, Brazil, South Africa, or some other tropical paradise. When you think about it, it's not bad at all. Meg, take me with you! Meg itself didn't have any serious competition or a natural enemy, but its infants were too weak to defend themselves. That's why the apex predator had to choose warm, shallow waters with no strong currents to raise its babies. Those, by the way, were around 6.5 feet long, not quite tiny themselves. Scientists actually found some of their juveniles' teeth, so it seems like part of their nursery areas was the coast of Panama, and that's 10 million years old. Okay, time to meet with one of Megalodon's potential rivals, the mighty sperm whale. 45 to 60 feet long, the size sure makes it quite an adversary. Modern sperm whales don't have such big teeth, but their ancestors, which lived around 13 million years ago, were well packed. The largest tooth found was 5 inches wide and 14 inches long. That's something like the biggest soda bottle out there. That would make an interesting combat. Here, we're talking about this giant marine predator, but this is not the only intriguing ancient animal that wandered the oceans. In fact, sharks are some of the oldest creatures on our planet, more ancient than insects, mammals, dinosaurs, even trees. Mass extinction events wiped out most life on Earth. Giant asteroids fell on its surface, continents split up, and so many other things happened. But sharks were there, alive, persevering, apparently with no contact with the outside world, just chilling and doing their thing. The spiny shark was actually one of the first animals with a jaw. Not that it could do much with that jaw, since it was only around 12 inches long. Meg wouldn't even bother around this one, and it wasn't even a real shark, it just looked like one. If you ever wondered how a combination of eel and shark would look like, well, here it is. Eel shark preferred freshwater, was up to 3 feet long, and went extinct around 200 million years ago. Since dinosaurs appeared around 230 million years ago, the eel shark was probably there to give them warm welcome, prepare a buffet, but the dinosaurs had unfortunately mistaken it for dessert. Now, this predator would get some real screams on a nice sandy beach during a spring break if it was still alive, the Ginsu shark. It was nicknamed after Ginsu knives for a huge mouth of almost 500 razor-sharp teeth. One of this monster shark's hobbies was to go after big turtles. Okay, now seriously, what's with that shark turtle thing? Scissor-toothed sharks. Now we're talking. These guys lived around 300 million years ago and had some strangely shaped heads. The weirdest part were their jaws. This shark didn't shed old and worn-out teeth, but kept growing new ones at the back. Those in the front were then pushed forward, and with age, the shark got a really strange scissor tooth look. Scientists are still unsure why it had to be like that. Hey, time to call in the orthodont. Even during the Meg's long reign, our favorite ancient predator still wasn't the only scary giant shark in town. For instance, I can't pronounce its name, so I'll just call it Mr. C. Unfortunately, not enough of its fossils were found to get more information. But some research says it had teeth more than 5 inches long. That also implies it could probably grow to be 20 feet long. Oh, and if it only left just a couple more teeth around, I guess the Meg wouldn't be the only movie star from those times. So close, C, so close. Looking for something slimy? Well, many people tend to believe that snails are just slugs with shells. But even though they look so similar, they're completely different species. Slugs don't need any protective shells, as all their internal organs are, internal, inside their slimy bodies. They can squish themselves and get into hard-to-reach places, which is why slugs can often be found in the most unlikely spaces, like under tree bark, or inside tiny crevices, or at the library pretending to study for exams. Snails, on the other hand, are tightly connected with their shells and can't survive without one. Unlike hermit crabs, which replace their shells as they grow, snails are born with a shell on their back. Baby snails look adorable with those fragile translucent bubbles that calcify and become bigger and tougher with age. Cute? Well, you be the judge. Many of the snail's internal organs are inside the shell too, meaning that if it gets crushed or damaged, the animal would probably not survive. Still, a snail can repair small scratches and cracks in the shell with the help of proteins and calcium secreted by its mantle. Now, turtles are very close to snails in this regard, by the way, because contrary to common myth, they can't leave their shell at a whim either. A turtle shell is an integral part of its body, and despite the reptile being able to hide its head and paws inside to protect itself from predators, its skeleton is fused with the hard shell, and just like any other animal skeleton, it grows with the turtle itself. Now, koalas do only eat eucalyptus leaves, but there are over 600 different kinds of those, and koalas only munch on 30, or just 5% of what's available on the menu. So it has to be a very specific eucalyptus tree to make a good meal for a picky koala. These adorable creatures also have something in common with domestic cats. They sleep for 18 to 20 hours a day. Polar bears aren't at all white. Their skin is black under the fur. They need the white color to disguise themselves while on the hunt. The color black absorbs the sun better than any other, while white fur doesn't stop sunlight. Rays pass right through it. In a sense, a polar bear has transparent fur. There's a myth that dogs and cats see the world in black and white. In reality, they just can't distinguish some colors. Nobody knows how exactly dogs see. Some think they only distinguish 2 colors. Could be blue and yellow for all we know. But they can see shades of other colors better than people. And cats have wonderful night vision. They need about 7 times less light than a human to see in the dark. Now, giraffes were thought to be mute, but recently it's been found that they make low-frequency sounds at night to communicate with each other. During the day, they don't say a word and warn each other of danger in a very unusual way, by moving their well-developed eyebrows. It's likely that at night it's difficult to see the eyebrows, so they start talking for real. While we're on the topic of giraffes, these animals sleep much more than 30 minutes a day, but probably not as much as you do. Their sleeping pattern is quite typical. After researchers monitored a herd of giraffes, they found out they slept at night and took short naps in the afternoon. In total, each giraffe had around 5 hours of sleep every day. Oh, and by the way, a herd of these guys is actually known as a tower of giraffes. Makes sense with the long necks. Seagulls can drink seawater. There are salt-secreting glands near their eyes. These glands purify seawater very quickly, and the salty residue comes out through the nostrils. Yep, you guessed it, salty snot. The Adelie penguins are real romantics. They only have one partner for life. The male must give a smooth stone to the female to create a family. You could say that's kind of an engagement ring. Like humans, though, a female penguin may refuse and not accept the ring. Speaking of animal love, foxes are romantic too. Male foxes are good fathers and husbands. They're devoted to their loved ones for life. They look after the females and even pick fleas from their fur. Aww. Male foxes improve their whole houses and take an active part in their baby's upbringing. Dolphins can sleep with one eye closed and the other one open. Half of the brain dreams and rests, and the second half closely monitors the environment for signs of danger. The perfect brain for sleeping during boring classes and meetings. Hey, I didn't say that. Besides, dolphins manually control their breathing. They can simply drown if their whole brain is sleeping. Sea otters are the cutest sleepers among all animals. In the summer, because of the heat, sea otters spend all the time in water. They swim on their backs and sleep in that position. The babies are sleeping on their mother's stomach, and two adults hold each other by the paws so that they're not carried apart by water currents. Ostriches don't stick their heads in the sand when threatened. In fact, these guys don't bury their heads at all. This myth has spread thanks to that famous idiom to hide one's head in the sand. In real life, ostriches have to dig holes in the sand for their eggs because they're flightless birds. To make sure they're evenly heated, ostriches put their heads in there to rotate the eggs from time to time. But ostriches still have some escaping mentality. When they face some threat, they can flop to the sand and stay perfectly still, pretending they aren't alive. Now, according to a popular misbelief, sharks can breathe only while moving because swimming helps them push water over their gills. Although many kinds of sharks are designed this way, many others, like bottom-dwelling nurse sharks, don't need swimming to pump oxygen-rich water over their gills. Meanwhile, all sharks do lack swim bladders, so if they stop swimming, they'll probably sink to the bottom. But luckily, a shark's body can't be compressed. That's why rapid descents or ascents are safe for them. Scientists from Japan played audio recordings for cats to prove they're truly dismissive. In those recordings, the owners of the cats called them by their names. Cats' pupils dilated, the animals moved their tails, legs, or ears. Cats heard people, but rarely responded. It's all about evolution. Cats came to people because they were attracted by mice that ate grains. They lived close to people, but were never tame. And yet, we keep feeding them. Birds are actually the only surviving dinosaurs. They evolved from theropods, the dinosaurs that ran on two legs. Yep, T-Rex is a distant relative of chickens, ostriches, and even hummingbirds. In reality, flamingos are white. The bird turns pink due to beta-carotene. This pigment is found in the algae and the shrimp that it feeds on. You can change your color too. If you eat a lot of carrots, your skin will turn slightly orange. This will happen because of the high beta-carotene content in the vegetable. Sailors from all over the world talked about the giant squid they met on their voyages. For many years, scientists considered monsters with long tentacles to be a myth. But in 2004, the first photo of a giant squid was taken. They actually exist. Scientists have registered an animal that has grown to 43 feet. Mosquitoes actually bite some people more than others. The most delicious humans are those with type O blood. Also, these insects have really good eyesight. They're attracted by green, black, and red colors. So, check the color of your clothes before you go camping. You can actually put a shark in a trance for 15 minutes. To do this, you need to stroke the nose of a dangerous animal with your hand. This sort of hypnosis is called tonic immobility that happens thanks to the receptors in the shark's nose. When stroked, the receptors send a lot of signals and the shark's brain is unable to process them all. Now, what it doesn't say here is exactly how you get close enough to a shark to rub its nose. I'd say that's important information, don't you think? Elephants aren't afraid of mice per se, but these massive animals have bad vision. They also move fairly slowly. That's why they can get startled by a bird or a small creature, like a mouse, darting past them. Just the element of surprise, nothing more. The chameleon can change its color, but this creature doesn't do it to camouflage itself. The color change helps the animal regulate its temperature and communicate with peers. Now, when most dogs pant, Their tongues hang out of their mouths. That's why many people think that's how they sweat. In reality, dog sweat glands are located on their paw pads. Plus, there are other sweat glands all over their bodies. Dogs pant to evaporate moisture from their nasal passages, tongues, and the lining of their lungs. This also helps to cool them down. You might leave wasps alone, but don't be so sure they'll do the same. Bees do respect human boundaries, and if you don't bother them, they won't hurt you. But wasps are so bad-tempered, they can sting you even if you're just walking by their nest. Well, phooey on them. Well, guess what? It's time for another round of the truth or myth game. Check out these facts you've known since childhood and try to figure out which of them are actual facts and which are no more than popular misconceptions. Zombies are not made up. True. Okay, we as humans can't turn into ones as we see in movies, but the animal kingdom has its zombies. For instance, one type of fungus takes over ants with specific chemicals. Something changes in the ant brain, so it leaves its family to fulfill a special mission, finding some special branch or leaf where the fungus sprouts out of it and then releases spores back into the world. Bats are blind. Not true at all. The myth probably comes from the fact that they're nocturnal creatures and have extraordinary hearing abilities. They hunt mostly when it's dark and rely on a thing called echolocation, just like whales. But it doesn't mean they're blind. Their eyes aren't useless, they're just adjusted to low-light conditions. The world's biggest waterfall is under the ocean. Now, this one's very true. It's in the Nordic Sea. The cold seawater is denser than the warm waterfall. The drop is almost 2 miles. The smallest wasp in the world is not bigger than an amoeba. Well, this is true as well. This wasp has the same body parts as other bugs, like eyes, wings, brain, legs, and more, but it's just 0.008 inches long, which in most cases makes it smaller than single-celled organisms we also know as amoebas. An ostrich egg will always have several yolks. Not true. Just like a regular chicken egg, an ostrich one has just one yolk. It's pretty large though, equal to about 24 chicken egg yolks. All dinosaurs were giants. Well, that's false. Movies show them as huge, scaly lizards, but nope. First off, there were many smaller dinosaur species, and some of them were as small as a turkey or a pigeon. Plus, some dinos, like T-Rex, were even covered with feathers, especially at the early stages of their lives. Oxygen is colorless. Well, this one is true, but only partially. As a gas, it has no color, but in solid or liquid form, it has a sky blue shade. We only use 10% of our brain. Well, speaking for myself, that's true, but it's overall false. The idea about hiding incredible powers in the rest of our brain makes for a good movie, but in reality, it's different. We actually use 100% of our brain all the time. It's only that parts of it are more active than others in different circumstances. The origins of the 10% myth date back to the 1890s with Harvard psychologists William James and Boris Sidis. Lobsters taste with their feet. Okay, this one is true. Humans actually do the same sometimes. We can taste garlic with our feet. Rub some of it on the bottom of your bare foot and enjoy the taste in your mouth. The chemical that gives garlic its unique smell gets absorbed through the skin, passes through the bloodstream, and ends up in your mouth and nose. Well, I think it's a good thing that we don't have to taste everything we step in. Moving on. Apes are our ancestors. Nope. We are all primates and have some common but very distinct ape ancestor with species like chimpanzees. Still, evolution works in a more complex way than that. The family tree divides, after which each species develops in their own direction. That way, humans and apes got many distinctive features after dividing their lineage in a very distant past. Then maybe Neanderthals are our ancestors? Myth again. Even though they lived at the same time modern humans at one point, they mostly inhabited different areas of our planet. So they're not just a stage of human development, but a different lineage. They were also pretty creative. They used fire, made tools, ate medicinal plants, cleaned their teeth, and did so many more things similar to our species. Neanderthals probably went extinct because of the harsh climate changes. The sun is yellow. Not true. This is an illusion created by the Earth's atmosphere. The true color of the sun is white. It all depends on the temperature. The cooler the star is, the deeper and darker it is. So the coolest stars are dark red or brown, and then there are hotter red stars. If the star is about 10,000 degrees Kelvin, it's blue. The sun is not the hottest star, so with a surface temperature of about 6,000 Kelvin, it is white. Black holes are actual holes. This is a myth. Contrary to what the name implies, they aren't empty. They are very dense objects with an extremely strong gravitational pull. Here, step into this. Whoops! If you venture into a desert, you probably still need to grab an umbrella. True. It's a common misconception that it never rains in deserts. For example, the Sonoran Desert in Arizona is probably one of the wettest deserts on Earth, with up to 20 inches of rain per year. Dogs can only distinguish black and white. Myth. Sure thing your pup won't tell the difference between maroon and purple, but dogs do see a few colors. Their dominant ones are blue and yellow. For instance, when doggies see a rainbow, it looks for them as a sequence of brownish, light yellow, gray, light blue, and dark blue. Cats need whiskers for balance. That's a myth again. Cats need their whiskers to feel what's around them, not to maintain their balance. Also, whiskers help them see and navigate, so they basically act as antennae. The Great Wall of China is the only object made by people that's visible from space. Not true. NASA photos prove that there are quite a lot of human-made objects you can see from space. There are highways, bridges, some large airports, and even the Kennedy Space Center. Goldfish have a 3-second-long memory. No, but I do. Fish are actually really smart. One study showed goldfish could tell the difference between two classical songs. They're not quick learners, true, but after over 100 sessions, they did it, which wouldn't be possible if their memory could only last for 3 seconds. The deep sea is completely dark. Myth. Yeah, sunlight penetrates deep waters weakly, so technically we can say that below 3,200 feet, there's officially no light. However, there's another type of light down there. It's all about blue and green luminescence. It generates light thanks to an enzyme called luciferase. It breaks down high-energy molecules and produces photons in bacteria and some deep-sea fish bodies. The ostrich buries its head in the sand. Not true. The bird would most likely have big problems because of suffocation in this case. What really happens is that they lay their head and neck down against the ground. Since these parts are light-colored, they blend in, which actually explains why people think their heads are buried in the sand. Also, the Earth is round. Or is it? Well, technically it has flattened poles, together with a bulge at the equator. That way, it has an irregular shape of an ellipsoid. Hey, remember that one for your next party conversation. Water boils when you add a bit of salt. That's a myth. It doesn't make any difference, and even if it does, it may even take longer for the water to boil. Porcupines shoot their quills. No, not quite. These quills are on their tail, sides, and back. They lay flat until the animal starts feeling threatened, but it's not their defense mechanism, since quills are rather soft to the touch. Maybe the myth occurred because these quills may detach if you touch them. A camel's hump is for water storage. No. These humps store fat, while the extra water is stored in their bloodstream. A blue whale's tongue is so big, it can weigh as much as a full-grown elephant. Well, that's true. Yep, these fellas are huge. Also, the heart of a blue whale is almost as big as a small piano. Wait a minute, heartstrings, piano strings. That must mean that blue whales can play the piano. And that's how these myths sometimes get started. You lose more heat through your head. Nah, the real reason people believe so is because when it's cold, our head is the only part we're most likely to keep uncovered. If we went outside wearing just a t-shirt, we'd lose heat through our arms. So, wear a hat, guys. Meanwhile, if you're wearing only a t-shirt outside in winter, it's not only going to be your arms that get chilly. Water doesn't, in fact, conduct electricity well, but it's only true about distilled or pure water. People can get an electric shock while being in electrified water, but that's because pure water doesn't exist in nature. It usually contains dirt, minerals, sand, and other stuff great at conducting electricity. The vacuum of space is not always cold. It depends on where you measure its temperature. If it's a totally freezing part of our universe, the vacuum of space can get as cold as minus 454 degrees. But if you travel closer to the sun, your thermometer will show a boiling 250 degrees. By the way, it's the reason why astronauts wear white spacesuits. They reflect sunlight and don't let people inside get too hot. There's a misconception that mustard seeds are the tiniest ones out there. But in reality, there are smaller seeds, for example, those of watermeal, poppy, or duckweed, and the tiniest seed on record is that of the orchid. You can relax, coffee doesn't make you dehydrated. This drink does have a slight diuretic effect, but scientists haven't found any evidence that coffee drinkers have a higher risk of dehydration than, let's say, tea drinkers. Now, elephants aren't afraid of mice per se. But these massive animals have bad vision. They also move fairly slowly. That's why they can get startled by a bird or a small creature, like a mouse, darting past them. Just the element of surprise, nothing more. Brown bread might not be healthier than white one. The loaf you've bought can be brown, but it doesn't automatically mean it's 100% whole wheat. If you want to buy a healthy and nutritious product, always read labels and check what the main ingredients are. It should be whole wheat or wholemeal flour. Most people are sure there are just 3 states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. I am an expert in gas. But people tend to forget about plasma. Unlike what we see in sci-fi movies, plasma isn't some goo or gel-like substance. It's rather superheated electrons and ions, often called ionized gas. Almost any element can turn into plasma if you heat it enough. But then, its molecules will break down and it won't be the same element anymore. For example, if you want to turn water into plasma, it'll no longer be H2O, and you won't want to drink it. That's for sure. There's almost no difference between how fast salty water and pure water will boil. The temperature of salt water will get higher faster, it's true, but salty water also has a higher boiling point. Plus, when you add salt to the same volume of water, its mass becomes greater and it takes longer for it to boil. Bananas do not grow on trees. The banana tree might get as large as a real tree, up to 25 feet, but it's a plant, the world's largest perennial herb. This plant doesn't have any woody fibers and can't be considered a tree. It also has massive stalks and leaves, but no trunk and branches. There's a misconception that diamonds come from coal, but in reality, they're compressed carbon that gets heated at more than 90 miles below the surface of our planet. As for coal, it's found a mere 2 miles down. Georgia is known as the Peach State, but it's California that grows the largest number of peaches in the U.S. For example, in 2017, this state produced more than 540,000 tons of peaches, while Georgia isn't even in the top 3 producers. Isn't that peachy? Some people believe that duck quacks don't echo. It's not so. All sounds ducks make, including squeaks, honks, or yelps, create sound waves that bounce off a hard surface, producing an echo. The myth itself appeared because of the landscape of the ponds where most ducks live. The area is usually flat, and there's nothing for the sound waves to get reflected by. Even with hills or mountains around, though, the sounds ducks make would be too faint to create a loud echo. But this can refer to any sound. There are tons of diets that encourage you to cut carbs from your meals. But this food group is your body's main source of energy. It's also not always fattening. Everything depends on how much of carbohydrates you consume. Eating too much of them will, of course, lead to weight gain. But instead of avoiding carbs altogether, you can focus on eating their healthy variations. They can be beans, lentils, corn, cereals, wholemeal bread, and so on. Your pooch does not see the world in black and white. Specialists claim that dogs' vision isn't the same as people have, and they don't see all the hues you do, but still, they can distinguish between colors. Some people wear hats in the winter only because they believe that 90% of their body heat escapes through their heads. But you only lose about 10% of your body heat there. That's not more than what you'd lose through another uncovered part of your body. For example, your ankles, neck, or hands. The Bermuda Triangle is believed to be a harrowing patch of the ocean. Sailors and pilots are prone to lose contact with the rest of the world and disappear there for good. But that's not just an intriguing legend. The truth is that the Bermuda Triangle does not have any more shipwrecks or mysterious disappearances than other waterways. Ooh. An apple a day will not keep doctors away. They will still call to confirm your appointment. An apple is a wonderful fruit, packed with fiber and vitamin C. It's also true that both these components are crucial for your long-term health. But they aren't the only ones you need. Plus, if certain bacteria or viruses enter your system, apples won't help you, no matter how many you eat. The Great Wall of China isn't the only human-made structure visible from space. If you're 180 miles above the surface, it's very distinguishable. But from up there, you can also see highways, bridges, dams, airports, and other huge constructions. And if you go further to space, you'll only see the wall in radar images, not with the unaided eye. Sign language isn't universal. In different countries and regions, there are different variations. For example, in the US, people use ASL, which stands for American Sign Language. It's based on a one-handed finger spelling alphabet. And in the UK, they have BSL, British Sign Language. It uses a two-handed alphabet. It's a popular belief that organic food is more nutritious and pesticide-free. But in reality, there are pesticides approved for use in organic farming. They're naturally derived, but sometimes just as harmful to the environment as their synthetic analogs. On the other hand, the amount of chemicals on both organic and non-organic foods is so low that it's safe to eat both kinds. And no study has proved that organic products are more nutritious either. Lightning can actually strike the same place twice or at least hit very close to the first spot, which means that it's extremely unsafe to try to escape danger by hiding in the spot struck by a lightning bolt. Find shelter, do not touch anything metal or electrical, and stay away from windows. So, you probably think it's sugar that causes your headaches. But in reality, the culprit may be a fast drop in your blood sugar levels. In some people, a meal heavy in carbohydrates leads to excess production of the hormone insulin. Glucose levels drop, and a person develops a headache. Natural sugars like honey are believed to be better than processed sugar. But scientists are sure that the biological effect of corn syrup that is high in fructose is almost the same as that of honey. The only problem is that candies and other sweet things contain more sugar per serving. And this also means more calories. Eating ice cream isn't likely to make your cold worse. Well, that's a relief. Some people believe that dairy products increase mucus production, but experts claim it's not true. On the contrary, frozen dairy foods can soothe a sore throat. Plus, ice cream can provide you with calories you wouldn't eat otherwise. Tons of people believe that toilet seats are swarming with germs. It's true that bathrooms aren't the most sanitary places, but toilet seats are cleaner than, let's say, our cell phones. Yeah. Since toilets are often washed and disinfected, there are statistically 10 times fewer germs on them than on our most used gadgets. Egad! It's common knowledge that people have 5 empirical senses: sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. But it's not exactly true. There are at least 4 additional senses you have. That makes sense. You also have the sense of your orientation in space, the sense of temperature, the sense of balance, and the sense of your physiological condition. Now, your muscles will not cramp if you swim right after having a meal. Your body will require additional blood to digest all this food, but it won't be enough to stop the muscles in your legs and arms from working in the way they should. People use much more than 10% of their brain. Your brain is busy all day and all night. It needs about 20% of your body's resources and never ever turns off completely. Each part of your brain performs its own function even when you aren't paying attention. White eggs are no less healthy than brown ones. The color of an egg shell depends on the kind of chicken that laid it. The nutritional value of the egg has much to do with what the hen has been eating. A mother bird will never reject its little one, even if it has been touched by a human. Almost all birds have a poor sense of smell. That's why the birds simply won't know the difference. You don't have to struggle to gulp down 8 glasses of water every day. The volume of water you need depends on different factors. Among them, your overall health, the levels of your activity, and the region where you live. It's not the moon's gravity that causes the tides. Earth's natural satellite does pull on the water in the oceans, but this tug is more than 100 million times weaker than the gravitational pull of our planet. What creates the tidal force is the gravity interplay between the Earth, Moon, and the Sun. Plus, it's more of a push than a pull. There's a misconception that carbonated water doesn't hydrate you as well as flat one. Many studies prove this fact wrong. For example, the participants of one of them kept cycling until they sweated off 4% of their body weight. Then they immediately had a drink. First time, it was flat water. Second time, they drank carbonated water. Then they were given sugar water. And after that, it was carbonated sugar water. It turns out carbonation didn't make any difference in how effectively the participants got rehydrated. Mount Everest is considered to be the tallest mountain on Earth. But it's only true if we speak about its height above sea level. If we take a base to summit height, the tallest peak on the planet is Mauna Kea on the Hawaiian Islands. Everest rises to 29,035 feet above sea level. For Mauna Kea, this number is a mere 13,800 feet. But it also extends 19,700 feet below the Pacific Ocean, which means that a larger part of it is submerged, and the mountain's total height is 33,500 feet. That's nearly a mile taller than Everest. The chameleon can change its color, but this creature does it not to camouflage itself. It can't even spell camouflage. Heck, neither can I. The color change helps the animal regulate its temperature and communicate with peers. It's not the temperature that defines deserts, it's a lack of precipitation. Most well-known deserts are hot, it's true, but some of them are freezing cold. They're called polar deserts. You can find them in Greenland and Antarctica. Right-brained people are analytical, and those who are left-brained are creative. Or at least that's what most of us think. It is true that different hemispheres of your brain are more engaged in certain tasks. For example, your left hemisphere is in charge of languages. But no study has ever found out that people can have right or left brain dominance. When most dogs pant, their tongues hang out of their mouths. That's why many people think that's how they sweat. In reality, dog sweat glands are located on their paw pads. Plus, there are other sweat glands all over their bodies. Dogs pant to evaporate moisture from their nasal passages, tongues, and the lining of their lungs. This also helps them to cool down. Giraffes sleep much more than 30 minutes a day, but probably not as much as you do. Their sleeping pattern is quite typical. After researchers monitored a herd of giraffes, they found out they slept at night and took short naps in the afternoon. In total, each giraffe had around 5 hours of sleep every day. When you call someone using your cell phone, the signal doesn't go through a satellite. Your device is constantly looking for wireless radio signals. Then it transmits data to and from land-based cellular towers. Let's say you call your friend. Then the nearest tower connects you to another cell through a huge network of tower-to-tower connections. There's a myth that your blood will turn blue if it runs out of oxygen, but this misconception is based on an optical illusion. Blood might look blue because you see it through layers of tissue, which makes it appear to be a different color. Not all comets have tails. It depends on a comet's location. If it's somewhere far away from a star, it'll look like a small frozen chunk of ice and rock. But once it approaches a star, the ice starts scattering away because of the solar radiation. This looks like a tail. Sometimes a comet's tail is too faint for you to see. It's impossible to see millions of stars, even on the clearest night or when you're far away from any sources of light. The highest number you can spot if you're lucky and have good eyesight is around 3,000. These stars are the ones that are closest to our planet and bright enough. Lots of the luminous objects you see in the sky are artificial satellites, planets, and distant galaxies. People can grow new brain cells. You don't start life with the same set of brain cells you'll ever have. There's a lot of proof that your brain keeps producing new cells even when you're a grown-up. At least this process goes on in certain regions of your brain. Hey, doesn't that give you hope? You might leave wasps alone, but don't be so sure they'll do the same. Bees do respect human boundaries, and if you bother them, they won't hurt you. But wasps are so bad-tempered they can sting you even if you're just walking by their nest. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter isn't a region of randomly floating and constantly colliding large rocks. If you ever found yourself there, you'd see how empty and calm it is. The asteroids are so far apart from each other that the chances of collision are laughably small. If you were traveling by a spaceship, its radar would easily detect asteroids and help you avoid them. Honey can actually spoil if you leave it uncovered in a humid environment. Make sure to always keep the lid on the product and don't let any water get inside. Then your honey will be edible for a really long time. Its antibacterial properties won't let any organisms grow in there. The moon doesn't really have a dark side. Our natural satellite is tidally locked with Earth. That's why we always see just one side of it. The sun, the moon, and our planet are all constantly moving. Sometimes that one side of the moon that's always visible to us is brightly lit. Then the far side is dark, and vice versa. Hey, I hope you found this illuminating.
A human year is not the same as a dog year. You might have thought that dogs age 7 times faster than we do, but it's not that simple. A dog that's been around for 1 year is, in fact, already 31. It will most likely even have its own little puppies running around. But here's where it gets tricky. 2 human years don't necessarily mean that your dog is 62 either. Your buddy will need to be around 4 in our years before it reaches old age. A 4-year-old dog will be 50, but a 7-year-old dog will be 62, and an 8-year-old dog will only be 64. So, they age faster, but also slower and slower as time passes by. The next time you're celebrating your best bud's birthday, be sure to put lots of candles on the cake and buy even more presents than you normally would. A common misconception is that dogs are colorblind. They're not, but they don't see color exactly as we do. They have trouble distinguishing between their reds and greens. It all just looks like a mash of gray, brown, blue, and even yellowy tones. That's because their eyes lack one of 3 photoreceptors needed to perceive colors fully. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Wrong. Because of their old age, they might need more persistence from you, but it's not impossible. The key here is to be as positive as you can. If you see they're not feeling up to it right now, that's okay. Let them rest. And in a little bit, you can pick the training session back up. Reward still needs to be a big part of the whole ordeal. After Max successfully speaks, give it its favorite biscuit. Then, it'll speak on command whenever you ask it to. That dog has shoes on, They might seem unnecessary, but today the weather's 90 degrees outside. Imagine walking with your bare feet on asphalt during this heat. You'd feel like you're stepping on lava, and so would your pup. Some dogs are better equipped to handle different weather conditions, but dog shoes can prevent your little buddy from harming its paws. It's the same during winter. When it's freezing cold, you wouldn't just walk around without a jacket on, so make sure your buddy is warm too. Dogs with a lot of fur don't need to get their hair cut to feel lighter. They have what's called an undercoat. In winter, it gets thicker, which gives your buddy an extra layer of protection from the cold. Then, during springtime, your dog will shed some of its fur. It's that same undercoat that will keep your dog comfy during hotter days. When you shave a dog's fur, the new one coming in might get curly or entangled. It might just be better to leave it as is. You can also find different alternatives to keep them cool. Keep it in the shade when they're out, and always bring a bottle of cold water with you, so your buddy's always refreshed. At home, you can put damp towels for them to lie on. If you have a garden, you can also turn its sprinklers on and let Max run free. It'll exercise and have lots of fun. Not all dogs are great swimmers, but all dogs love swimming. If yours can't swim all that well, it might be because it has a bulky chest and a large flat head. In fact, it might not even be able to stay afloat. Get it a swimming vest designed especially for dogs. Some people might say a slightly open window is enough to keep a dog in the car. This isn't true, because after spending just a few minutes in a heated or cold car might mean severe health implications for your best friend. Some states even let you let a dog out of the car if you see it in there, to let it breathe. If your dog can't stand mail carriers, it might be because it's trying to protect you. They bark because they're trying to alert you, their pack leader, that the vicious mail carrier is coming. You can fix this by introducing them to one another. This way, your dog will recognize them as a friend and not a villain. Unlike you, your dog isn't yawning because it's sleepy. Yawning is a way for them to show anxiety. If it doesn't like cats and there's one around, it could yawn. Or maybe there's a new person in the house and Max isn't feeling comfortable in their presence. Or you take your dog to a play date, but they're not getting along. Max keeps yawning because he's getting upset. Yawning is also a way to show you it's running out of patience. It might be time for both of you to leave. Dogs eat grass when they're sick, but this isn't always the case. Catching your dog eating grass when you've been talking to your friend for way longer than you should have probably means it's just bored. They do it to be rebellious too, or just because it's fun. It won't be a problem if the grass isn't treated. Either way, just make sure it doesn't eat too much of it. Otherwise, head out to the vet. Even a little bit of chocolate is poisonous for your pup and should be kept hidden away at all times. This includes cocoa powder and baker's chocolate. This applies to cats too. If you suspect that your pet has eaten a large amount of chocolate, take it to the vet's office immediately. Well-trained dogs will do what they're supposed to and obey commands, but don't think they'll never bite you. It can act out of emotion. Imagine your dog's scared. You've put it in an uncomfortable situation with lots of new faces. This has been going on for a while, and Max isn't able to control his emotions anymore. So, a new person tries to reach it to give it a pet and gets punished. Nothing harsh, but it was unexpected. Maybe it felt like it needed to be defensive. Thinking they're protecting and guarding you is another reason why a dog might bite. Or if they're feeling too intimidated by whoever it might be. You've got two dogs and you're about to enter your house. One of them is waiting for you in its bed. It doesn't make a big whoop about it rather than wagging its tail. The other one comes running to the door. It whimpers, jumps, and wags its whole body while running in circles around you. This doesn't mean it loves you more. It just means it's not properly trained yet. Tail wagging doesn't always mean your dog is excited. You can observe a dog's tail to understand what it's feeling. If it holds its tail high but isn't moving it, it's alert but also trying to assert its leadership. Still held high, the tail is moving now. It means the feeling's changed a bit. It's alert but happy. It's still trying to show it's the boss here, but at least it's feeling excited now. When its tail is between the legs, your dog's feeling afraid. Or, if there's an alpha dog around, it might mean your buddy admits its leadership. A tail that's held straight out means the dog is taking in new information, feeling the room. It's not reacting though, it'll stay neutral while doing this. If a dog's tail is wagging fast, it means excitement. The faster they wag their tail, the more excited they are. A slow wag conveys insecurity. It might be because of another dog or person. Now, imagine your dog is wagging its entire body. You even see its hips wagging. This means it's friendly. It might happen when you're in the elevator, and it spots its best friend from the apartment complex. The worst wag of them all is an extremely fast vertical wagging tail. When doing this, your dog can be mean to others. It might be feeling territorial over you. It's best to remove yourself from the situation. If your dog's tail is wagging to the right, it means it's more relaxed. And a left wagging tail means stress.
Oceans cover 70% of the Earth. On average, the ocean is 8 Empire State Buildings deep, and less than 5% of its mysterious depths have been explored. It's even possible to find lakes and rivers beneath the ocean. They're denser than the rest of the water surrounding them, so you can clearly see the difference. When the coral is in shallow waters, intense sunlight can damage the algae living inside it. To protect the algae, the coral produces some proteins that act as some kind of sunscreen for it, so they really don't need to spend money on it. Okay, most of the ocean may not be explored, but what we do know is about 20 million tons of gold is dispersed through its dark waters. It's concentrated in really small amounts, which is why it doesn't pay off to mine it. If we could take it out, every person on the planet would get 9 pounds of gold. When sharks need their morning joe, they go to a cafe too. Back in 2002, researchers found an area in the Pacific Ocean called the White Shark Cafe, where great white sharks come during the winter. They simply hang out, tell jokes, and laugh at stories of how many humans they've scared, and then go back to the coast to scare us a little bit more when the weather gets warmer. Hey, have you had a great white latte? Try one. The widest point of the Pacific Ocean goes from Indonesia to Colombia, and at that part it's 12,300 miles across, over 5 times wider than the diameter of the moon. We might imagine oceans are cold, especially in depths where the temperature is only 40 degrees Fahrenheit. But there's an exception. Water that comes out of hydrothermal vents in the seafloor has a temperature of up to 750 degrees. Humans are the only animals whose brain gets smaller. Yup, as we get older, it tends to shrink. It can do so even because of isolation and loneliness. Other animals, even some of our distant cousins from another side of the family tree, like monkeys and chimpanzees, have no problem with that. I'm guessing television is the probable cause. Our eardrums have nothing to do with the sense of sight, but they still move when we move our eyes. In the average lifetime, our heart beats over 2.5 billion times. I've counted. Our nose can detect over 1 trillion smells, and our lips are hundreds of times more sensitive than the tips of our fingers. 2 of our body parts never stop growing: your nose and your ears. Cockroaches are tough. They can survive harsh conditions and have been around since dinosaurs ruled our planet. But the termite queen beats all that, with a lifespan of 50 years. That's the longest any insect can live. Regular termites live only 1 to 2 years. It's not the water camels store in their humps, but fat. They store water in their bloodstream. Bees can fly really high, more than 29,500 feet, which is even higher than Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on our planet. Sloths are able to hold their breath longer than dolphins. Yup, they slow their heart rates, and they can stay that way for almost 40 minutes. Dolphins have to come to the surface to catch some air every 10 minutes. The moon has volcanoes, and scientists believe these might have been active around 100 million years ago, when dinosaurs still ruled our planet. Wow, the view must have been magnificent. There are watermelons the size of a grape. Cucamelons, if you prefer, mouse melons, actually look like really small watermelons, but at the same time have a citrus flavor. Not just mouse melons, there's also the kangaroo mouse. This animal doesn't feel the need to drink water. It lives in the Nevada desert, and since its habitat is really dry, it simply learned to quench its thirst through seeds it likes to eat. You may think parking is expensive in the area where you live, but is probably cheaper than a spot you'd pay in Hong Kong. Just a 135 square foot spot placed in front of the center, which is the 5th tallest building in the city, was purchased for almost $1 million. I'll take a bus ticket, please. Speaking of expensive, and I was, the world's priciest hot dog is $169, and you can try it out in Seattle, Washington. I don't have the money, but I am a little intrigued, must admit. An Australian barista set a world record for the most cappuccinos made in 1 hour. 420 of them. That's really a Java jive. You can taste garlic with your feet. Rub a clove right in your feet, of course take the socks off beforehand, and wait for it. The chemical responsible for its unique smell can be absorbed through the skin even though the clove was never in your mouth. By the way, lobsters can try out the same experiment. Well, they actually taste any food with their feet. Okay, researchers have found many things that are evidence of prehistoric animals or our human ancestors that lived thousands of years ago, like bones, teeth, stone tools, and a piece of chewing gum, dating from almost 10,000 years ago. In Tibet, there are black diamond apples that aren't green or red, but dark purple. The place where they grow has plenty of ultraviolet light over the day, while the temperatures drastically go down during the night, which makes the apple skin get a darker color. Australia has a lake of naturally bubblegum pink color. The unusual color is there because of the pigment from a certain type of algae living there. Clouds look so fluffy like they're made of giant puffs of cotton, but the average one weighs around 1.1 million pounds, so please stay up there. A farmer from Iowa got hiccups that didn't stop for the next 68 years. First, hiccuping was about 40 times a minute, and after a while, 20 times. He actually spent 70% of his life hiccuping. 1 million seconds is somewhere around 12 days, and 1 billion seconds is almost 32 years. Nothing unusual here, just a little bit of good old math that reminds us how cool the time is. Okay, sharks may be scarier than humans, but our teeth are just as strong as theirs, just smaller. Until the beginning of the 19th century, Americans actually thought tomatoes were poisonous. So many tasty meals they missed believing that. Yup, farmers discovered not just people have regional accents, but cows also have different moods, according to the area where they live. Hey, do cows get moody? Giraffes have a tongue that's up to 20 inches long. Ooh, ice cream maybe? Actually, they can bend trees with their tongues. There's a specific type of jellyfish that's actually immortal. Hey, I can see that as a logo for a life insurance company. The Earth is orbiting the Sun, but not at a fixed speed rate. We don't sense it, but it's slowing as time goes by, so our day will become 25 hours long in about 175 million years. So don't plan that extra hour in your schedule just yet. Space is huge, duh. But there's obviously lots of empty spots since there are more trees, 3 trillion, on our planet than stars in the Milky Way, only about 300 to 400 billion. Wow. When someone mentions the biggest desert, you probably picture the endless sandy surface of the Sahara, burning under the hot sun. Well, not quite. The biggest desert is the Antarctic Polar Desert, which covers over 5.5 million square miles in Buffalo. Nah, Antarctica. Sounds strange at first, but the definition says a desert is a place that gets less than 10 inches of precipitation annually. Still, it doesn't say if it has to be hot. Ostriches don't actually hide their heads in the sand. When they sense danger, they lower down their head, neck, and body to the ground, which makes them a little bit less visible to predators. Their light-colored neck blends in with the sand, so it only looks like their head is hidden down there. The first commercial passenger flight happened at the beginning of the 20th century. It was a 23-minute flight that cost $400, which is about $8,500 today, and the plane flew between 2 cities in Florida. A famous Egyptian ruler, Cleopatra, lived closer to cell phones than to the time when the Great Pyramids of Egypt were completed. Well, that's a gap. Speaking of cell phones, every 2 minutes there are more photos taken than in the entire 19th century. Okay, let's add one more to those statistics. Cheese!
The ear-piercing sound of sirens brings your relaxing Saturday afternoon to a screeching halt. You jump out of the chair and run to the window. The sky is covered in black clouds all the way down to the horizon. The trees are nearly bent over flat from the gale-force winds. Together with the rain, golf ball-sized hail crashes into the ground, on rooftops, on parked cars. It sounds like a stampede right over your head. Car alarms are going off everywhere. Just then, crack! Huge bolts of lightning flash across the black sky. Then the monstrous grumble of thunder. Your heart jumps in your throat. As you peer through the window at the sudden chaos outside, you're filled with a primal fear of the power of nature. You snap back to reality. The sirens! Gotta get to the basement! You start to turn away from the window, and that's when you see it. A massive tornado ripping along the city street. It's throwing entire motorcycles, refrigerators, and even trees like baseballs. The roof of that building starts peeling off like a Band-Aid. The twister even lifts cars and pieces of asphalt as if they're made of feathers. It seems this tornado will flatten your city within an hour tops. You finally snap out of your hypnosis and run to the basement. The sound of the city being ripped apart terrifies you as you hunker down below as low as you can. But after about 20 minutes, everything is suddenly silent. You head out to see the clouds have disappeared, and the sun's rays illuminate the street. Luckily, your house was spared, but your modern city now looks more like ancient ruins. Stop. Tornadoes never come into cities, right? Yeah, they do. This monster doesn't care where it goes and what it eats along the way. While we're at it, you can forget about the myth that tornadoes will magically stop when they meet rivers, lakes, or mountains. They just keep on going. But about that no twisters in the city thing, about 1,000 tornadoes hit the US each year. That's 75% of all the tornadoes in the world. Most of these monsters occur in a strip, okay, more like a long blob, running up and down through the middle of the country. It's an area aptly dubbed Tornado Alley, a perfect spot for these things to form. You get cold, dry air coming down from Canada, meeting warm, humid air traveling north from the Gulf of Mexico. Warm air is less dense than cold air, so it rises and creates a strong updraft. Water droplets surround it to create the funnel cloud. There you go, recipe for a tornado. Now, if you closed your eyes, spun around, and put your finger on a map of the US, the chances of your finger landing on a major city are pretty slim. If you gathered all the cities in the whole country into one area, it would only be 3% of the US's entire land. Just like your finger, the likelihood of a tornado striking in the city is much smaller than landing in a rural area. When it comes down to it, tornadoes can touch down in big cities. They just hardly ever do, thanks to sheer chance. Another surprising myth. You always see a tornado coming because, funnel cloud right ahead. Not true. The approaching funnel can be completely camouflaged in a wall of rain. You might finally see it when it's right on top of you. In this case, you'd better trust your hearing. First, tornado warning sirens go off if you're in a place that has them. Second, listen for a loud rumble that sounds like a train coming. That's a sure sign this beast is somewhere nearby. Many people immediately start heading for shelter when they see green clouds in the sky, because we all believe it's the #1 sign of a tornado coming. Don't buy it. Yes, a green sky is a sign of a severe thunderstorm that's powerful enough to produce tornadoes, but it's not a guarantee like many people see it. While we're at it, you know how movies show the ground ripping apart during earthquakes? The gaping hole that swallows cars, houses, entire cities? Not a shred of truth to this. A crack may appear in the ground with major earthquakes, but it rarely exceeds a couple feet wide. One of the most overspread myths out there is that lightning will never strike the same place twice. Tell that to the Empire State Building. It gets hit by bolts of lightning at least 25 times a year. Pretty sure nobody's picking the building up and moving it to different locations. Yes, lightning likes really tall things, and it's not shy to keep coming back. As for that old warning about your cell phone or jewelry attracting lightning, busted. There hasn't been any scientific support for the idea that personal objects with metal in them attract lightning. You still shouldn't be out and about during a storm though, cell phone in hand or not. Now, if you're looking for a tsunami and only focused on giant walls of water, You might never see one, even if it's right in front of you. Tsunamis aren't always massive tidal waves crashing into the shore. More often than not, they look like the tide is rising extremely rapidly, receding and rising again until it overspills into the city. Not that tsunamis never form walls of water, it's just not as common. Picture Earth. Are you imagining a perfect ball? Well, to resemble the truth more, squash the poles down a little. There, now you have a realistic Earth. Scientists call the Earth an irregular sphere, or ellipsoid in fancy terms. The planet rotates on its axis, causing the equator to bulge out a bit, just like what happens when you spin fast on a merry-go-round. You feel pulled out and away from the center. What's the highest point on Earth? Everest, of course. But if we go from the point furthest away from the center of the Earth, the crown goes to Mount Chimborazo in the Andes. Its peak is actually 6,800 feet closer to space than the summit of Everest. That's because Chimborazo sits near the equator, where the planet's bulge is greatest. The blue whale weighs as much as 30 elephants, makes sounds louder than a jet, and eats 4 tons of food every day. It's the largest living creature this planet has ever seen. Only, not technically. Head to the Malheur National Forest in Oregon, home to a creature that weighs as much as 20 blue whales. The honey mushroom is a humongous fungus colony united into a common system. The giant covers an area of 1,500 football fields, and it's thousands of years old. Ask anyone to draw the sun, and they'll draw a happy yellow circle. But if you look at our star from the moon or the International Space Station, you'll see that it's actually white. From Earth, the sun looks yellow or red thanks to the atmosphere acting like a filter. Most people think time is constant and moves at the same speed no matter where you are. But the speed of time depends on how close the watch is to Earth. The weaker the gravity, the faster time passes. So the person living in the apartment above you is aging faster than you. Now, it's only 90 billionths of a second faster per 1 foot higher, so don't expect to notice a difference if you decide to move to the first floor. The ground under your feet feels pretty solid and whole, but in reality, the Earth's crust is all broken up into plates surfing on oceans of liquid rock called magma. You don't feel it, but the ground under you is moving a little over half an inch per year. That's about the same rate your toenails grow. Largest desert in the world? Easy. The Sahara. Nope. It's Antarctica, which is almost 2 times bigger than the Sahara. A desert isn't just a scorching sandy place where it doesn't rain. It's a place with very little precipitation, so that includes snow too. In some parts of Antarctica, it hasn't rained or snowed for millions of years. In other parts, snow does fall, though rarely. Point is, there's a myth that it doesn't snow in extreme cold. Antarctica is the coldest place on Earth, and it snows there. There is some truth to this old saying. Cold is drier. It doesn't retain moisture as well. You need moisture to produce raindrops and snowflakes. That's why there are fewer chances for snowfall when temperatures drop so low.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or